Welcome to the SmartCom Summit Winter 2021. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this event. We will be talking in the next couple of hours about the future of modern work and customer experience. And I think we have a terrific lineup with a number of great speakers who will join me a little later on this talk show table. Let me mention a few companies represented here: Anywhere 365, Microsoft, Mavenir, Poly, Logitech, and we'll be talking to Adrian Swinsko. You may know the guy. He wrote the book Punk CX about customer experience, and he has, I think, came out today or will come out tomorrow, Punk XL, about the experience of leadership. His new book coming out, we'll be talking with him about the customer experience. Let me tell you, we'll be talking, and I have my script here, we will talk about thriving in challenging times. We'll be talking about the next normal. We'll be talking about the digital acceleration and leading innovations in ecosystems. All subjects very much of importance to you guys, representing companies, representing your customers, representing innovation. Actually, I was reading a lot about this subject, and I came across a few quotations I truly liked. One by McKinsey. They wrote a report the other day on the title, Adapting Customer Service. Let me quote: particularly in times of crisis, and we're talking about maybe not a crisis, but at least, huge challenges and changes. They write, particularly in times of crisis, a customer's interaction with a company can trigger an immediate and lingering effect on his or her sense of trust and loyalty. And of course, that's what you need, trust and loyalty of your customers. One more quote by Accenture. They wrote a report titled A New Era in Customer Engagement. Let me quote. They say, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. And then the catchphrase, nothing could be worse than a return to normality. And they actually mean, of course, the old normal. We have to find a new normality. Nothing could be more important than realizing that nothing is worse than a return to normality. Isn't that a great motto for this event this afternoon? I truly am looking forward to see you all in some 28 minutes, around 2 o'clock Dutch time. It's going to be a terrific program. And let me tell you one more thing. It's an interactive event. You can follow us on Twitter, on YouTube, whatnot. And if you want to reach us, go to Twitter, SmartCom21, hashtag SmartCom21. And you can reach us, ask questions, make remarks, etc. You're very welcome to join us. I hope to see you in a little less than half an hour. The future is now. Hope to see you in 27 minutes. Thank you. Welcome to the SmartCom Summit 2021, the winter edition. We will be talking about the future of modern work and customer experience. And we live in exciting times, so there's a lot to talk about. We will talk about modern work, customer engagement, we will be talking about leadership, and actually there's some interactivity as well. You guys can participate in this event through Twitter, #SmartCom21. We'll be looking back on 18 months of Corona COVID pandemic. And we'll be talking to two representatives of major companies on my right-hand side, representing Microsoft and Anywhere 365. And I'm joined on my left side by Rob Curver. He's, in a way, the big initiator of these events and summits. Thank you for all the work you put in. Let me introduce our two guests, and I'll start with you, Enrico Karsten, is the CEO of Anywhere 365. I was looking at your website, and you are talking about one of your goals for your customers: reduce unnecessary dialogues. As a kickoff, what is going on? Reduce unnecessary dialogues. What's going on?
To start off, this is a necessary dialogue.
Thank you very much.
A small correction, because I'm the managing director of Anywhere 365, so I don't want to, take false claims over here, because I've got someone else that does the CEO job for me. Unnecessary dialogues, Shall we believe that time is in essence the most valuable possession that we have as a collective within organizations. And we are here to make that time effort focused on as many valuable communications and activities for our customers and their customers. So we believe in reducing unnecessary activities or unnecessary dialogues in our specific space to help them with this exercise and to make sure that we spend our time collectively on the right things. We happen to make software that enables them.
And how often is communication or meetings, for example, dialogues unnecessary? Is that something that happens often or just every now and then?
Well, I think over the course of every service or service-focused organization, there are many unnecessary dialogues. When you look at the times that you yourself, as a consumer, have to dial an energy manufacturer or whatever with information requests that you could already have via different channels, or you could maybe get a hold on via automatic digitalized channels, instead of just talking to people or reaching out to people who have very valuable time to do other stuff. I think that represents our means of existence. Yeah.
And talking about necessary and maybe unnecessary dialogues, that brings me to our second guest, Remco de Kramer with Microsoft. I was looking at your website, and you talk, of course, a lot about Microsoft Teams. And I quote, "Since its launch, Microsoft Teams has become the fastest growing app in Microsoft's history. Congratulations." How big is it now?
Thank you. Yeah, I still remember the days, and that was not long ago. It was for COVID that there were 30 million active users. Today, it's 250 million active users. So we can safely say that Microsoft Teams has become the new front end for work and customer engagement too. So, well, that might be impressive numbers. What I like the most is that the rate of innovation has accelerated exponentially too.
That's what crises do, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you see here. And of course, during COVID, the demands users put forth on our product have risen as well, with a shift to remote and hybrid work. So when you look at last year, in 1 year, we released 300 new features, for example, for Microsoft Teams. So the product is really adapting at a rapid pace to this new reality of hybrid work.
But before we came on live, we were talking about Microsoft Teams, and you said, and quote me if I don't quote you correctly, people should have less meetings. So, in other words, use Teams less. You're
Absolutely.
Microsoft.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for that we stop the meeting madness. I think it is out of control. Okay. Yeah. So when you look at a day, and there are people have never been in meetings more. Since the start of COVID. It has almost become synonymous with remote work. And I think what's really important for people to thrive, and also for companies to thrive, is that they focused on the work that's most meaningful or most important for them. And they cannot do that when they don't have large chunks of uninterrupted focus time. And meetings just gets in that way.
Because you would assume with using Teams or Zoom or whatever you want to use. I mean, you want them to use Teams, of course. I mean, you would assume you save a lot of time because you don't have to go actually to meetings. You don't have to jump in a car or a train and go somewhere, have a meeting, and go back. So you would assume you save a lot of time, but actually we don't, because we have more meetings than ever.
Well, but technology is only so great. The benefit of technology depends on how it gets adopted. If we have a mentality that for every decision that needs to be made, or every update needing, we need to plan a meeting, then this technology will facilitate you, but you use the technology in a wrong way. So what we would like is that people have less meetings and work more asynchronously together. I have a lot of examples for that, but maybe that's a bit too soon for now. But I think we need to find a way to balance synchronous work with asynchronous work. So working within a meeting and working outside of the meeting.
But basically, we lowered the barriers to have meetings. Yeah? So a lot of people
make it so easy. Two touches of a
button. Touch the button and just go into a meeting. And that what I can see is that a lot of people just tap into a meeting to get something solved or to get their head around a big problem instead of thinking themselves there first. And the second of it is that you call it meetings. Using Teams is like having a meeting. Well, peer-to-peer communications is just peer-to-peer communications. But over the use of Teams, we call it meetings. But we just have peer-to-peer communications as well.
There's this old
just by viewing someone, it's not a meeting necessarily.
There's this old cartoon pre-pandemic that says that I didn't feel like working, so I organized a meeting.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a whole collection of those. So this concept of meetings as being the essence of work in some organizations is kind of special. And now it's so easy to have an online meeting. I feel bored, and people feel efficient or feel productive in some organizations, or when their calendar is booked with meetings, right? So I like what you said about finding a balance. I think it's also a very personal balance that we need to find, and that makes it so complicated. I remember when we started with the first summit at the start of COVID, we were wondering whether we would ever go back to the office as we knew it, right? Will this be a phase, maybe work a little bit from the office and at home? I think now, if you look around, we're going into a hybrid world, right? Because we see the benefits of work from home. But now the challenge is how to model that and how to improve work and improve office, or redefine it using technology, but also organization and leadership. So your personal experience this past 18 months, I was triggered by that when we talked earlier. You turned your shed into an office.
The world changed in your personal life as well.
Yeah, definitely. So me being a father of 2 young kids, I didn't want to work at home, from home at all. So I always worked at the office. So when suddenly offices closed, I had to work from my living room or my bed, depending on where my kids were not present. So I got back pain, of course. So then I moved to my bedroom. But after 1.5 years, I realized, maybe I want to do other things in the bedroom than work.
Okay.
So we had an old tool shed.
It took a long time.
Yeah. I'm not.
He had 2 kids already.
Exactly.
Very old-fashioned.
Yeah. So then we live in our old in a grandfather's home, and he had a shack in the garden for its tools and everything. So took those out, converted it into an office, and now I realized that how important it is to have a dedicated space where you work. So that was one learning. Other learning is that I'm a big advocate of asynchronous work as well, right. And we see that happening more often. When I look at my colleagues, a lot of them are actually working in the evenings. Myself, I'm working for 1.5 hours every evening, and I really like it that way. I wouldn't prefer it any other way.
Is that also because you're an international organization, so in the evening you have your US contacts, or is it also mostly the personal
This is mapping old-fashioned organizing on what we are trying to. Yeah,
I agree. So that's what I'm asking. Yeah.
So that I was a bit used to it, but I didn't do it often. So now I do it every night. And the reason why I like it is that because I can stop at 4 o'clock, play with my kids, or start working at 10 o'clock, and then have an easy start with the family. And then going back to asynchronous work, I really judge the meeting requests I have. And when it's an update meeting, I choose not to be there physically present, but to watch back the recordings in the evening. And because I'm not going to spend my time on watching a 1 hour recording, every meeting is transcribed nowadays, so I can search for the most relevant part, and I only watch back that specific part. And that saves me, so for one meeting, it can save me 50 minutes. And the 50-minute bonus is nice, but I also consume it at a time when I...
More convenient.
Yeah, when it's more convenient for me.
And this is the technology, so that's actually helping you then to live or to work or to be more efficient, more effective at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And your work-life balance is more in harmony with each other. Yeah.
But technology has a little stake in that, to my concern. Yeah.
It's mostly about
the main thing?
No, the storyline that you started this question with is like, man, I recall the paper that Bill Gates wrote on the modern work. So the new world of work.
20 years ago.
Yeah, it's 20 years ago, and I'm almost ashamed that we are still on this table talking about the transition.
Still on page 1 of the paper.
Yeah, So, of course, technology is an enabler in that space, but still, it's more the to be able to rely on responsibilities of people, to have good goal settings if you want, and to be able to measure business progress and stuff like that, and to have, let's say, middle management trained on not managing people in terms of time spent, but more in terms of what they achieve. Yeah. This is the biggest, I think, challenge that we were facing and still are facing with these dynamics.
So does that mean that you're changing now? I mean, you started at Anywhere 365 half a year ago. I hate that 365 part. Anyway, you started there half a year ago, in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Are you changing things around?
Yeah. Well, I think that the biggest learning for me overall during the whole COVID period related to work is my entrance within the Anywhere 365 organization, because of it's almost unheard of how big a challenge it is to enter a company only online. And to have the idea that it's all just the same, you can tap into and reach out to everybody. Everybody's on your fingertips. You can have meetings and spend all the time you want, but still the element of being a cohesive company with some sense of feeling and how it looks and how it feels, which office most of the time represents that feeling or represents that culture. That's very difficult to hold on to really connect to people.
Because it's not only the Friday afternoon drinks and having fun, but you know, it's water cooler talk or coffee machine talk.
Yeah, but
you run into people you wouldn't meet, or.
But it's also it's really. I thought about this 2 weeks ago when we had someone leaving the company, went to another company, of course, and I realized that in essence nothing changes. You know, he just opens the same laptop. Mm-hmm. And suddenly he is part of a totally different business stream, but in essence, in his environment, nothing really changes. So I mean, he's still at the table at home. He still has an own laptop. He still has the same sounds.
So there are two big elements here. Also, when it comes to customer experience, it's productivity and it's creativity, right? Mm. And you need them both in order to. I mean, we're talking about thriving in challenging times. Your companies are doing great, but if you want to continue to thrive in challenging times, you need also creativity. Yeah, you need innovation. Yeah. And how hard is it in times of Corona to stay on track when it comes to innovation that have gone? Yeah, well, you have to keep getting better and better and better.
So that is definitely a learning. When we look back at how we worked in this crisis, we all learned how to work from remote. People went above and beyond to keep being productive. They succeeded. We've never been as productive as before. But the downside was is you need to see each other in order to brainstorm effectively or to create a team bond or a good onboarding experience. So working from remote is definitely not a situation which you can sustain for extended period of time. It comes at the expense of innovation then, I think. So fortunately now, we've entered the area of hybrid work, where we can choose to have meetings at the office for specific types of meetings that require creativity or problem solving. So the good thing here is that we can combine the best of both worlds. So make a conscious choice whether you will do the meeting from home, because that it's more efficient, or whether to be more effective, you need to do the meeting from the office.
But then office changes, right? The office space, very practical, changes because you have...
It's a meeting place.
It's a meeting place, but it becomes an online hybrid meeting place instead of a traditional meeting place. And I think that's the big challenge that we have right now. From an implementation or practical operational point of view, there's a lot of changes to be made to whatever the office space is or the layout, what sort of rooms do you need. But also the organization and the way of working and expectations and mindset and who's in control, right? Do you have the same stake or the same position if you're remote working, or should you go to the office if you can because you have a better presence?
Yeah, but still in the whole vibe of the hybrid office in terms of making it a meeting place is not as easy as you would think of, because we are still plotting traditional working methodologies or departments, so to speak, that need to get a place into this hybrid office. So you have some specific demands for your support organization or for your delivery organization, whatever. You cannot change that. So I think that's a challenge. But you were relating to keep on being innovative during these times. We are referring to the fact that how we could work in terms of innovation, or what types of innovation are needed to help us go through these thriving times.
Yeah, because also I hear people, you were saying, the meeting mania. In Dutch, I hear very often the sentence, ik ben zo klaar met die online meetings. I'm done with meeting online. I want to meet people. I want to be with people. I'm done. That is a challenge for companies like you guys, because you offer the products that enable these meetings and are supposed to make them better and better, to make it a better and more pleasant, more productive, more creative experience, right?
But I cannot ask this to Remco, because I know they get educated very well on how to use and promote the technology and what type of. So I'm gonna ask Rob, if you have access to my calendar and you are going to invite me on a meeting next week, and you tap into my calendar and you see an empty week in terms of meetings, what is the first thing you think?
A lazy guy.
Rest my case.
Or Corona.
Rest my case.
No, but
this is truly what is happening. Yeah, so people block times as well, to not have the image of being not productive. So let's say calendar items and having meetings is like is an analogy for being busy enough.
It's an alibi, which is sort of an alibi, right?
Yeah. So this needs to change. So we have to. I want to have an empty agenda and still your trust that I'm very busy on the right things.
Yeah, or productive or valuable. Well, I this resonates with me because I grew up thinking that you need to work very hard in order to be successful.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've been trying to deal with for a long time in my working life, right? And it is hard, it's difficult. And of course, one of the tricks, and this also relates to how do you manage your time. I mean, for this, I don't have an empty agenda. I have blocks.
Why is it hard?
Blocks.
Why is it hard?
Personally, I think, I mean, and it's maybe a very Dutch thing or very, very Calvinistic thing, right? If you work hard, you will do well, and you will go to heaven or whatever. Something it'll
like it. Certainly not COVID.
Right, and
create a heaven in AR.
Yeah, but what is difficult about that? What is difficult?
It's difficult. I find it's in a way it's addictive to work, right? And I guess that's something that we see on social media as well. It's addictive to get the likes.
So
it's addictive to get. I think for many people, being in the meetings and getting the feedback. Okay, I did another. It's the same kind of addiction, isn't it?
I think because I like the example of I grew up in the same with the same mindset. The key for me is that it's not visible. So it's not visible anymore how productive you are and how much energy you are putting in things, because you're basically isolated, more individual, and hence that's why I'm asking about the agenda. That's the only mean you have to show that you're truly committed to doing.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, because you know both worlds, right? The startup world, where you're focused on getting something to produce
very
something.
hard.
Work very hard, but you're working towards a goal, and the corporate life where it's more scheduled for you. Let's put it that way, right?
Yeah.
And you go with the flow.
Unless you are at the absolute top, but everything else is.
Well, and I guess if you're at the top, your time gets managed because your PA will just make or arrange your calendar. So you live the company life. You've been in both of these worlds, right? In the past 20 years, as have I. What's easier? Or if you look at today's time, right, the change of COVID.
What is easier? Oh, sorry.
Easier? Are we going to switch to some sort of blend of those two worlds, or are we going to the startup?
I hope not. I would be very much in favor of going to startup is a buzzword as well, but startup scale up gives a sort of vibe that lets creativity in. Have the possibility to be innovative, have the possibility to schedule your own achievements and work hard for it. I would say those are the elements that are very crucial for us to survive in the next coming decades. But then again, I've been in a corporate as well, have not a lot of experience in it, only a couple of years, but I've seen how that works as well. So it works. I don't understand it, but it works. So it's a big machine. You put something in, and it does what it does, and then the same asset comes out of it.
And how's it at Microsoft? Because I admire Microsoft in that sense, because you've been, on this modern work for 20 years or so, since Bill Gates wrote that paper. It is actually, you had you were an example of a workplace years ago, right? Very modern, and little couches and little rooms and everything. And so you're living this life.
Great YouTube clips, I remember.
All that, and you're living there, and it is a corporate. I know it's an American corporate, right, with the goals and everything, and the procedures, and at the same time there is this culture of innovation, and personal responsibility and leadership. So how is that done?
Well, the first is what's happening today is nothing new for Microsoft. That a transition and the different way of how we work. The only thing that's different is that it's being adopted on a massive scale right now. And we are in different circumstances. And what you said triggered me, that it's hard for people to know what you're doing, and that you have to trust that somebody is actually doing their work. We have a saying at Microsoft, is work out loud. So let people know what you're doing, because you're missing this physical contact. You actually have to compensate for that and let other people know what you're doing, give them a chance to contribute to what you are doing, and make it a shared goal or project, for example. So I think this, and that is the most challenging thing, is that when we want to make a successful transition to hybrid work, we really need to change the way that we're working. We need new rituals. How we work. And for example, one is work out loud, let other people know what you're doing, and give them a chance to contribute to your work.
Yep.
But it's not really fair, because you asked this question to Remco, and represents a company that has innovation, tech innovation, at the core of its existence. So I would say that if you take another example of an enterprise or a corporate organization and ask them the same question, you get totally different answer.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is that Microsoft sort of didn't exist 40 years ago, and now is the number one or number two largest, biggest company in the world, and going well. And we just heard about the many users of Teams.
And in the tech world, it's one of the oldies, Microsoft.
Well,
because they've been a long way more.
But apparently, you're doing something right.
Yeah,
something's working there, right? And you could say that for many tech, I think that's intriguing. Many of the high-tech software companies are now leading in their space, and they've grown from nothing to big. They're doing something right, and I think that's interesting. What's the learnings for other organizations? And you can go, well, it's a growth mindset and a this and a that. But I'm looking for, you just mentioned something very simple, work out loud. Yeah. Is there a simple list? Is there a cookbook? Is there a playbook?
Is there a chip?
Is there
something?
Is there a chip?
Is there something that we can absorb?
I think one reason for the success is that you need to build solutions that are flexible to everybody's work style, so that can cater to the individual work style everybody has. That is what, for example, Microsoft Teams is doing. It doesn't matter where you work or how you work. The software is flexible enough, and so you can use it. For example, have meetings, have physical meetings. Try to find each other. Use Teams for that. Okay. Have remote meetings.
So you're saying that Teams, so that you're putting some of the knowledge and experience of how Microsoft works and is successful, you're trying to put that more into the, let's say, the Teams platform and ecosystem as we go along?
Yeah, definitely.
So everybody can become more like Microsoft in their way of working, or?
No,
but you need a lot of flexibility because every company is different.
You know as well that the technology and the way they adopt it is not the problem. The real problem here is, I love the way Remco proposes this, because in essence I would want everybody to work like this. Work out loud, not necessarily because I want to make sure that you're doing the right things, but just to be connected on the topics that matter to you. Yeah. But then again, please facilitate the people that need to work out loud, because they have the means and the tooling now. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they know how to do this in terms of timing, what they share, how they react on it. And there are examples enough of people that work out loud and get responses of what they're doing and have 24 hours a day absorbed in responding to responses. And they're at home one day, not feeling very well.
Let's talk in the final minutes of this segment, looking a little further into the future. Maybe a little bit of a crystal ball. And it's not just about what features should we add to Teams or other software in the next 6 months or 2 years or something. A little further down the road. I mean, you guys must be thinking about it. Is that virtual reality? Is it augmented reality? Is it more AI, artificial intelligence? What are we talking about when you talk about Teams 2025? I don't know. Well, what's the direction of thinking in your innovative departments?
We're exploring multiple options here. And one interesting concept is that you can meet in what we call the metaverse, that there is a virtual space where you can come together, either see each other physically or via avatars, interact with each other. But then the nice thing is, you look the other way, you see a group having a meeting there, there's a PowerPoint presentation on a virtual wall, you go there and you're in that meeting. So that's one space we explore.
Very scary space.
Very scary space. Yeah, personally, I'm experimenting with it. I have the gear at home.
Yeah, you do?
Really? Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's. I
don't know what
I don't
know what the status is of the metaverse testing. Then, so what type of environment are you using for that?
It's an internal development.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I'm exploring it. Personally, I don't see myself having the majority of meetings in the metaverse. Okay. Now, then there's another technology. It's called augmented reality, and that's where you have your glasses on, and then a additional layer of reality is played on top of the physical reality. Right. So that's an interesting scenario, especially for niche markets. For example, remote advisor applications. So where everybody's in a Teams meeting, but there's a situation going on. For example, some part of equipment is broken. Somebody needs to go there. They put on their HoloLens. Everybody can see what they see and support them. For example, drawing lines on which button he has to push.
This is already the case, eh?
It's already the case, but the thing here is it's not massively adopted. So I see that technology being adopted more broadly before, for example, meeting in the metaverse.
You said metaverse is scary. What's scary about it?
Well, scary is the way that will push us. I don't want to be all dark and all into the what is it called again? The sequence of Sapiens, tapping into the AR world and having. The scary thing about metaverse for me is that it's the beginning of being socially completely disconnected and have a push to more individuality and lose contact with we started this meeting about physical contact and the lack of physical contact during COVID and what it means in the vibe and connection of people.
But isn't that a very old-fashioned way of thinking? I mean,
it is.
Every single technological transition, we hear the same stories. I mean, this is going to be the end of the world. It's going to spoil our kids. And blah, blah, blah. I mean, are you not very?
What is
to be progressive instead of so conservative?
No. So okay. So maybe is it conservative?
Maybe
to see some
dangers.
Well, maybe the danger is that Remco won't leave his bed anymore because he doesn't have to. and
he doesn't need to check anymore.
Exactly.
No, but in the end, I must, I'm maybe a practical guy in that sense. I must see the true advantages of these developments, and I don't see them yet, other than getting us more away from groups and contacts.
But isn't that what people said 10 years ago about the iPhone?
I don't know. We'll see how that.
We'll see how it goes.
Back about the television and way back about the car and the train and the plane and everything.
But we have a major challenge, I think, ahead for us, because switching to remote work was easy compared to switching to hybrid work. Yeah. Before meeting in those kind of situations, let's learn how to meet in a hybrid way.
Yeah.
Because fact of today is that the majority of companies cannot facilitate a hybrid meeting for their employees. Yeah. And the result of that is that people working from home, and maybe they have to work from home, they don't have a choice, for example, that day, they are not contributing to that meeting. They can't see the people in the room well. They can't hear them. Yeah. People in the room, because a presentation is shared, can't see the people who join from remote and lose connection, for example. So those basic elements to get a good hybrid meeting organized is still lacking for the majority of organizations. And when you don't get hybrid meetings, when you cannot facilitate that, your hybrid work strategy won't work.
Right. So there's
a lot to be worked.
The first step now, really, for next 2 years, is really that hybrid workspace, office space, home space. Everybody get a shack or some tiny house in the backyard, and make the first step.
Mm-hmm. Could be.
I think so. Yeah.
If you need a tiny house for it.
Maybe you have a big house.
No, I'm not. I don't have a shack.
You have a tiny house in your house. Yeah, it's good too.
Okay, we have to leave it there for now. We'll see each other a little later in the program. A little further down the road, we'll talk about customer engagement and the next normal. But first, we'll talk to Stijn Nijhuis. He was Entrepreneur of the Year 2021. Quite an honor. We talked to him earlier on. We asked him about this big honor to be Entrepreneur of the Year. Stijn Nijhuis. He is the CEO of Enreach.
So let me start with congratulating you, Stijn. Entrepreneur of the Year.
Thank you.
Award a couple of weeks ago. I know you worked hard to get that. I remember us sitting 10 years ago at the Fast 50 Awards, where you were the winner exactly 10 years ago. And I know that since then you've worked really hard to build your company Enreach. What does this award mean to you personally? Is it a recognition?
Yeah, I see it as an encouragement more on the path that we are in. It's you could see it as recognition, but that would mean we need to look back and be very satisfied with what we have achieved. And sometimes we take 5 minutes for that, but then we would like to look forward again what we want to achieve. And I think we were asked to participate here, and that was a big honor already. And then to win, especially looking at the past winners of the past years, it's quite a compliment. But as I said, an encouragement on the path that we are on together with Enreach. It's also our first award as Enreach, and also an encouragement. Maybe also on the way we run our company, which is quite unusual, but it played a big role, I would say, in the competition, because you cannot talk about Enreach without talking also about holacracy, the way we are organized. I rolled into being an entrepreneur. I never really worked for anybody. I was started my first company when I was 19. So that's not a plan, that's an adventure. And that's how I see it also. And for me, it's a logical way to continue. When I'm doing something, I want to do it better, and when you keep doing it a little bit better every year, then suddenly you find out you're quite big. Now, I always said if we would exceed 1,000 employees, I would probably not think that this was a lot of fun anymore, and I would leave. Well, I'm still here. We're 1,100 employees because I found out it actually is a lot of fun to try to make 1,100 or more than 1,000 people work together effectively and not accept the typical bureaucracy and slow processes you see in these big companies, but to see if we can do it better and faster. So for me, not where I expected to be, but at the same time, still unexpectedly a big challenge. And yeah, what I love about my job is that I get to improve myself also every 3 years or 4. I'm not doing the same now as I was doing 3 years ago, and I hope in 3 years I'm doing something else again, because maybe I get bored quickly, or I think if I'm doing it for 3 years, someone else should be able to do it, and I should be on to something else that brings the company further. And I think that's always been my attitude, and it's a bit of a surprise that we can take it this far, but we are for sure today not where we want to be yet. We are in a very, very fast-moving market, and we have so much more to achieve. So, again, personally, a very nice recognition, but also just the start as far as we're concerned.
Just to start, and I like what you said about reinventing yourself every 3 years, because the last 3 years, well, 2 years and a bit, were kind of special, right? With this whole Corona pandemic going on. We like to think that we're getting to an end, but it may also be our new normal, that we have to deal with these sorts of viruses and situations in a different way of working, which of course is very influential, especially for people in this industry, right? Because we're shaping that industry, and that's exactly what SmartCom Summit is about. That reflection on that. But if you look back at your own, let's say, past 2 years. When it started, I remember we talked at the SmartCom Summit about a year and a half ago, and when we made some predictions about how things might work out in this new era. Maybe we would work more online, and maybe it would be a phase. But if you look at that now, if you look back at, let's say, the past 2 years, what do you think is the biggest change that's now, let's say, really normal already? And what was your personal biggest challenge during that period?
Yeah, I don't have any. Well, the biggest change I saw, I think, is the same one everybody saw. It's the fact that so many of your meetings are moved to video and remote. Even this interview today, as an example, sometimes expected, sometimes unexpected, and seeing that can also work quite well. I think that for me was the biggest change. As for anybody, it took some time to getting used to it. But I think in some aspects it was a blessing in disguise for us as a group, because we have 22 offices across Europe, where if you rely on personal communication and personal contact to communicate your vision, your culture as a group, that means a lot of travel and a lot of single points of failure. And while if you're able to convey your culture, your purpose and as a group to your entire company remotely better, then of course, and you have to in Corona, then all of a sudden you find that sometimes people who are further away from you are actually getting closer thanks to Corona, because they are more included, while they in the past were not. So I think that's a positive sign. And me as a leader personally, I still have a lot to learn there, and I'm learning a lot every day. It's not that easy to, for instance, a topic like culture. It's hard to grasp. It's hard to define, and it's even harder when you don't meet in person. And especially in the past summer, when we were able to meet in person again, all of a sudden you have some discussions in the sidelines of a meeting, or while you're meeting each other at the reception or at the coffee machine, and those are topics you actually realize, hey, we don't get to that remotely. And how can we do that remotely? How can we capture that serendipity, that basically unexpected conversation about something new, while we're in a Teams call or in a Zoom call or in an Enreach meetings call? That's difficult. So enough challenges still left for me as a leader as well there, I would say.
I'd like to introduce Lars here at this point. Lars van Tuin, long-time friend of mine, international business coach, and he did a PhD on purpose and motivation quite recently, I think, Lars. So this is your cup of tea, I would say.
Well, yeah, it's some time for some questions. I'm so curious about to learn some things about you, Stijn. So a question would be: you talked about the first Entrepreneur of the Year award that you obtained, and congratulations with that. And you said we couldn't have a part of that was also how we organize ourselves, our culture and leadership. And you mentioned the word holacracy. So I was curious about, hey, what does that concept of holacracy entail, and how does that contribute to being a successful entrepreneur in your vision?
Yeah, I think so. What holacracy means, it's a system of self-organization. So also distributed leadership. So it's a concept a bit different to the typical hierarchical leadership model, where you have a CEO and a management layer and a management layer below, and everything directives flow top down, and also reorganizations and changes in the structure go top down. In holacracy, this is much more bottom up. Everybody's organized in roles and circles, and they get to craft their own roles and circles in a way that fits the purpose of the company and the purpose of that circle. Without diving too much into the details, I would say that system for us, we introduced it when we were 100 or 200 people company, because we found we were getting slower and more bureaucratic, just like the companies we are competing with in many cases. So in my view, that means your right of existence is under threat, because if your right of existence is we're faster, more flexible, more personal than the big ones, you don't want to become like them. So and then people tell you, yeah, that comes with the territory. If you have more than 100 employees or a couple of hundred or 1,000, you get this, you get politics, and you have to deal with it. Well, I refuse to accept that. So I went on a vision quest, you could say, to see how can we solve this. Read some books, which sometimes is a good spend of your time, I found. And I recognized a lot in the theory of holacracy and the problems it can help you solve. So for that reason, I said, hey, this sounds like something we should try in our company, actually. And yeah, how has it contributed to me as an entrepreneur? I think it's about letting go. It's very simple. Now, I may be already someone that did that quite fast. I remember when we had 14 people, I hired a head of HR, because I also know a lot about what I'm not good at. And I love to have people working for me that are better in that. So the more the merrier. And for me, it was already the goal to say, hey, I want to be not needed in the organization. And not because I don't have anything to contribute, but the highest goal or purpose as a leader is to be not needed, in my view. And then you can find something new to add to the organization or some new insights and still contribute value. But if you're needed for even for processes or even for new product introductions or something, then the organization is not done yet. It's not standing on its own 2 feet. So for me, holacracy has helped to accelerate that journey, and I think that's also something that I think the jury recognizes as an interesting difference between Enreach and other companies, and probably you'd have to ask them, but I think it helped in winning this award. Yes.
I find it really fascinating. You said, like, when we had 100, like 200 employees, we started, and people said, well, you have to get used to that because things will slow down. That set you off on a quest for another model in your orientation on how can we overcome the complexity of a growing organization. And you found holacracy. And what were the elements that spoke to you like, hey, I should try this?
Yeah, I think decision making is one. So we recognized a lot of times that when you are not in a holacracy, but in a typical organization, of course, you end up usually when you grow in a type of a matrix organization where there's cross-functional teams working on certain products, and then there's line leadership for development and operations and all these skill-based silos. And that created a lot of unclarity in the organization. Okay, do I have multiple bosses now? Who do I listen to? So this was before holacracy. And it also, for a decision-making process, was very unclear who gets to decide what. And then you get either two things. The one who speaks the loudest makes the decisions in these teams, which can be the case, or the decision is completely democratized, which means 15 people get to decide on every single thing, which means things go really slow and lots of meetings, buy-in creation. Oh, now it's a nice new version of the PowerPoint because someone in the room had a better idea, and things get to really slow down. And those two things, holacracy can help you solve quite massively, I would say. One is the role clarity. You can have multiple roles. I can have a role as a developer, plus a role as someone who is part of the chat product team, for instance. And both roles will have clearly defined accountabilities and also a lead link or someone who helps set the priorities. So much more clarity on that. And second, on the decision making, yeah, in holacracy, it's quite simple. The default is yes. So if anyone in the company has an idea, the answer is by default yes, unless someone can prove, and me as a CEO or a lead link as we call it in holacracy, I don't have any special rights there. Anyone in the company, if they prove in that circle, actually, if they prove the proposal causes harm to the organization, and it's a high burden of proof, if they prove that, then the proposal will need to be, or those objections will need to be integrated and the proposal needs to be adjusted. But anything other than that means, hey, if that helps you, that proposal, you as a role filler, as an employee, it helps you take a step forward, then go for it. Because we can always change afterwards or take small iterations. So you find out when you make decisions small and quick, it's much safer to take them because you can also take a decision to reverse it again if you find out it didn't give the desired effect. So get used to a lot of small changes instead of having these big reorganization projects. From a decision-making perspective, that was very liberating, I can say.
Yeah, I love it. Great. We're out of time. Thank you very much for this half hour of your busy schedule. I know you need to run to the next meeting, I'm sure.
And I do a checkout.
I'm looking forward to meeting in person again soon, and we'll definitely come back on this subject. Lars, thank you very much for your contribution. You're going to be doing more sessions focused on leadership and purpose and all these things over the next couple of months. I'm really looking forward to this because I think this is the most important thing.
No, and I love talking about it. So happy to join any other time and engage further because we've only scratched the surface. And I'm also happy if anyone who listens to this says, I'm very interested in holacracy. I would like to start with it. Always happy to make some time and give some pointers on how to start and what to watch out for. So it's all about sharing, I would say.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, guys.
It's great. Stijn says, I love to talk about this. And Stijn, it shows. That you truly like talking about it. And my gosh, you really give us a lot of food for thought. We've been talking here, and we'll be talking more about, hybrid working from home, working from the office, and all the, variations in between. And now you're saying, one of the things I wrote down here, the goal of a leader is not to be needed. That's a totally new model. So it's not just the way we work and where we work, but your perspective on decision making is so radically different from what we see in a lot of big corporations, both in the US and in Asia and here in Europe. Really, thank you very much. Now we switch to another subject, employee engagement. How do you organize in this day and age with all the changes, transitions, and revolutions, you could say? How do we keep our employees engaged? We invited two speakers about this subject, Lisanne Brons with Microsoft and Joost Jette of Logitech. We talked to them earlier on, and they explained how their companies, Microsoft and Logitech, deal with this issue. Keep employees engaged. We are in this huge transition, and key for companies is to hire and to keep the right people with the right talents. It's all about diversity and inclusiveness. And I have two distinguished guests here to talk about this subject. The first one is Lisanne Brons, Microsoft. Introduce yourself briefly, Lisanne, and tell me what were the issues you were confronted with in the last year and a half with the whole corona crisis when it comes to these issues, diversity and inclusiveness at Microsoft?
That's a good question. Yeah, so at Microsoft I'm responsible for our modern workplace and our cybersecurity technology. But besides that, for the last couple of years, I've also been running our diversity and inclusion initiatives in the Netherlands. And I think if I look back on the last 1.5 years, I think it's putting additional strain on the topic of inclusion, especially since people are working remote. How do you still feel connected to your team and to your company? But also, how do we make sure that we don't people don't fall behind or we lose track of how it's really going with people? So I think those are new challenges that have come up with the last period. On the other hand, there's also opportunity when it comes to remote work and diversity and inclusion, but I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit.
Absolutely. Our second guest, Joost Jette with Logitech here in the Netherlands. Introduce yourself and what were issues you were dealing with in the corona pandemic?
Responsible for enterprise and mainly responsible for the video collaboration part of Logitech, which is actually the products that most of us now more and more using.
The stuff we're using
the stuff we're using today. And as Logitech, we have always had that possibility and opportunity to work from home and to work from anywhere where we wanted. And that's indebted in our culture. And what we also saw, of course, in the last 1.5, 2 years almost, as we see the COVID, of course, continuing, as we call it, is that the use of video is also helping to keep the people closer to the company and closer to themselves. So the usage of video is also having a communication tool, but also having a tool of getting people towards each other, even in times when you're not seeing each other.
Yeah. In a situation like this, Joost, I mean, people say, under pressure, everything becomes fluid eventually.
Yeah.
Do things really become fluid when it comes to hiring people, keeping people, having the right talent? Do things really radically change since Corona and since COVID?
No, radically change. Yes, I believe so. I think there is a different way of looking at assets and looking at the way we work. I also look at the way we hiring people. I think Logitech has hired the most people in the last year, and they haven't seen an office or the person that they hired physically, because it was not possible all over the world. So we have hired people by video.
Our younger son, he's 26, lives and works in New York, has a new job at PharmaPacks, and he never met anybody. And he works for them full time.
And that is actually the case. So not even the employee, but also not your co-workers. So you see your co-workers on video, and then when we had the opportunity to at least come somewhere together, and sometimes in the offices of Microsoft when the possibility was there, and people saying, and people continue talking. So the thing is when you're meeting old friends, you always continue talking. At the same time, when you did a lot of video calls together, you continue talking. So it means that video has an impact on at least keeping the bond, but it's of course different than meeting each other in real life.
Sounds familiar, I guess, right? For you guys.
Super familiar, yeah. And I think video is very powerful. At the same time, we both work for technology companies. I think if you want, you can solve a lot of things. We've proven over the last 1.5, 2 years that people don't become less productive, even if they're working from home. Actually, we've seen people going above and beyond, maybe working even harder than before.
There was an international survey out the other day about engagement of employees, crucial for companies having engaged employees, and engagement was up. Instead of down, which is extraordinary. Yeah,
but an interesting one is that we found in our research that the engagement is up, especially on a team level. And I've experienced that as well with my team. We've been, since the beginning, it was like, this is a stressful time, let's support each other, how can I help?
Stay close to each other.
How can we stay close? Yeah. On the other hand, we see connection to the maybe the teams that are a bit further away from you. We see that going down. So if we look at connections to other parts of the company, people have less interactions.
There's no water cooler talk anymore.
Exactly.
You meet people you never met, and interesting to meet you. Right?
Yeah,
but also the big events. So we know from Microsoft and also from Logitech perspective is that you always have these big events to start up the year. We have ISE, we have Ignite, Inspire. So 20,000 people are there, and serendipity is something really great.
Take them all to Hawaii for 3 days,
right? No, but also even go to Amsterdam or even go to Barcelona.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be always Hawaii. At the same time, you're meeting people because you want to be connected there, and you meet the people, and then you create business or you create friendships and etc. And I think that part is missing. And I completely agree with you. Is that the teams that are working together in a matrix or all kind of forms that you have, getting closer, and you see that you get a little bit less, maybe you call it the mothership, that continues, but you don't have the interaction because once a year, twice a year, you got that vibe of belonging to something bigger, and you need to be careful about the fact if you're working for big international companies, you want to be part of something bigger that you connect that.
And I think it's a threat for two things, right? Like you said, one, it's a connection to the all-up company, maybe to the purpose or the mission of your company. It's very focused on the task that your team has to do. And the second thing is innovation. The creativity sometimes also flows from meeting different people and going outside of your own line of work, having that cross collaboration kind of going. And I think in this world it's not impossible to achieve that, but it's something that we need to rethink in the remote setup or in the hybrid setup.
Because I mean, is that a problem? I mean, everybody talks about productivity, and productivity, what I read from all kinds of surveys, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's all about also
balance.
in a tech company, very much about creativity. It's tomorrow's products or the day after tomorrow. I mean, in order to survive in the long run, you guys have to be creating and come up with solutions that we haven't thought up yet.
Yeah.
But it has also examples of a specific product we created with other vendors in cooperation with, trying to make a hybrid classroom, and we were all, of course, faced by the fact that our children had to stay home and came home. And I saw my daughter, she's now 17, at that time 16, was lying in her bed and following classes. And that was my example. So how can we do, this is not possible. And we had other parents sitting in other companies were saying, okay, let's have something what can we build? What can we do about it? So we got together and we had a very, very direct meeting schedule. So every Tuesday or every Wednesday we had like a 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock call all together, and everybody enjoyed it. And when you went eventually into Workstream, and everybody found it very nice. I said, actually we're missing that. Can we just put it back that hour? We've got different people talking about a topic and driving something really. And it was all done by video, and it came all out. And eventually we said, okay, we have to make it because it's.
So you're not too worried about the lack of creativity that I was talking about?
Not. I think in the beginning, yes, but in the time where we're developing in our environment, we're developing so much more possibilities, especially in creativity, that video and the total concept of creativity happening is that the engineers, which we all have, has also been focused on, okay, this is a world that's going to stay. So if we are not coming to the office or cannot be able to come to the office, we have to still keep that creativity process going. And this is where the change is now coming. So we take out of this crisis going forward, we take complete different ways of communication and way of how keep inclusiveness also available for everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's also about we're adapting to this new way of working, right? Yeah. And I think it's funny if you look at it in the beginning when the pandemic started, what we saw was that every meeting became the online meeting. Drinks on Friday became online Friday drinks, and the brainstorm of 3 hours became a 3-hour online brainstorm. And I think now we're really getting to a phase where people are more like, okay, 3 hours online. I'm not sure if that's the best way to brainstorm with this setup. The Friday night drinks, I'm happy on Friday that I can close the laptop and switch off, you know. So then it feels like almost an additional I'm not enjoying it. So it's not meeting the purpose. And I think now, I've already the last year, I think the first 6 months was very much, okay, we flip the switch and we just recreate it in the online world.
And it took a while, I guess, for a lot of people, also for managers in big companies, to realize that this is not a temporary thing.
No.
Yeah.
This is left or right, it's a permanent transformation, a permanent, I would say, revolution, right? Is it a revolution?
I think so. I think for me it's very fascinating. We've never embarked on such a huge worldwide experiment when it comes to doing work.
I think it's just as big as when we put internet into our minds, into our things. I think it's just as big.
Our 3 kids, they work out of London, New York and San Francisco, which is quite a treat for parents when you can visit them. But when I call them, thank you FaceTime, first of all. Secondly, I'm no longer asking them, how are you doing?
We can
the first
upgrade
thing
you.
I'm asking,
We can upgrade you.
from which time zone are you working today?
Yeah.
Right? Because they still travel.
Yeah.
And they still work like, it's totally natural.
The balancing act is in the beginning when you have your work times, let's call it go to an office, and differs from cultures and companies, but you have to go to office and suddenly you're not going to office anymore. So the feel of leaving out is suddenly in people's minds, okay, but my manager or the middle management always has issues on that specifically more because they're closer to the teams, as you earlier explained. And I think that's where that has changed, because now with the interaction of specifically video, because before switch your video on was a big thing.
Yeah.
Because the adoption of video was not really, no, not on video.
And people were uncomfortable.
Now people are just
privacy.
People are now sitting in their own room and they have this. This is my work room, and they have all the things there. And this is my daughter. This is my. Okay, great. Yeah. Okay.
That's my dog walking in.
Yeah,
right?
and my dog walks in, and the children come in, and suddenly it becomes a very natural environment. And I think that's one of the things why things are productive and people get engaged. I think the companies and ourselves as managers have the obligation also to be very careful about that. And because Logitech is a company that does these way of working, we also had a Logi Thank You Day, so that the company gave 1 day back every month that we could spend on free time, because they said you have to do that. And when employees were coming back to the company and or to the leadership of the company and saying, yeah, but 1 day a month, and maybe we should, okay, let's do it differently. Let's give you 2 days a quarter, which is of course a good very good trade-off. But do it Thursday, Friday. So on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you have a long weekend every quarter from Logitech, and nobody works. There is nobody who sends an email, and nobody comes into that because the whole company is closed.
Blacked off.
Blacked off. And of course, there are some functions and everything that carries on sometimes.
Of course,
most
service,
of the,
whatever.
Most of the 8,500, 9,000 employees switch off. And that also gives a very comfortable feeling, because most of the work we do is within our own peers.
And it's a huge perk for particularly young people who want more private time, who want more balanced private work, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about hiring and keeping the right people. Yeah. I mean, you guys work for companies that are popular, I guess, among young people. I mean, I know banks and oil companies have a really hard time to hire young people. You guys are popular. You're a tech company, you're innovative, people know you.
Nice people.
Of course, very nice people. But is it a challenge for Microsoft to hire and keep the right people?
Well, you're taking my point, but I think if you look at diversity and inclusion and hiring, we've learned a lot over the last decade. So I think we're in a pretty good state. We're able to attract the right talent. We've really changed our hiring process to really more what we call qualify out versus qualify in. So before we were thinking always like, okay, you need university degree. So when we go through resumes, that's you can shift and you can. Now we're more thinking, okay, qualifying in. Does this person, do we feel he or she could do this job? And what might be reasons of concerns, or what might, then we can investigate that, right? So it's a different way of looking at it. And also to your point earlier, this is also helping us to attract people who don't necessarily come from tech, to bring in new perspectives. And to increase our diversity on many different angles. It's not only men and women. No. But coming to your point, it's keeping the talent is, I think, where we're always still learning. This can be a challenge because it also really relates. Does someone feel at home? Do they feel included? Do they feel they can do what they like and so on? So those are different topics, and I think over the last decade we realized that we need to put more emphasis on that part as well.
Does it work out?
I'm honest, right? So it's not like we're not where we want to be on that part.
It is a huge transition.
It's a huge thing, yeah. And we see that the role of the manager is really crucial in this. So creating that inclusive kind of team culture, also helping people, especially young people. I don't know if you've heard about the imposter syndrome, but people might think, what am I doing here? Why did they hire me? I'm not sure if I can do this role. And it's the manager that is the key to making sure that they go through that first kind of first 1.5 years. And we see if they get through that, then they will stay with the company. But if they don't have a good experience within that phase, then the more diverse talents are at risk of then stepping out.
But it has to be, it has to turn out to be some kind of a match between the company and these new employees.
I think it's more about feeling at home and feeling that you're valued for your skills and attracting diversity. I think that's also the key difference between diversity and inclusion is we're a target-driven company, so if you say diversity, we put a number on it and then we go, so we fix that. Yeah. But that's the easy part, and it's more about culture, about atmosphere, about recognition, and those are much harder things. There's no one way to do that. Yeah,
different world for you guys as a manager, right?
Yes. And echoing some of the parts, but of course, cultural-wise, we are Swiss American and American by nature from Microsoft. So you have that culture in you. I think one of the biggest changes we saw is by naming it. So from human resource to people and culture. So human resource, the old naming. Before that, it was the Dutch word I cannot say in English. Personeelszaken, that's it. So, and then you move from HR, human resource, and then you move to people and culture. I think the lying is there, the wording is in
at Airbnb they call it talents, which is a different approach, but the same thing.
It's actually almost, it's always the same thing, because you know what you mean. It always gives a dimension on what you want to be, and I think if you have a diversified approach in your market, so we have different brands under the Logitech brand, we have different ways of how we're bringing products to market. We have a business product, we have consumers, we have gamers, we have everything. So if you fit the culture or the people inside, of course, the categories that you live, because we sell products, but that's what we do, or solutions. So it means that you have to have the people there that are connected to those products. So if you have age or gender or whatever you want to do, adding to a certain product line, they normally don't get it, because on gaming you talk a different language, on streamers and creators you talk a different language than in video collaboration. So I think fitting the right culture and the people towards the categories that you're selling, I think that's one part. I think the other part is, of course, how diversified your teams are that bringing those products to market. And that is, of course, the way how you look at your society and your culture, and you want to have the best mix of everything, because that's where you strengthen each other. Yeah. And I think that's the same thing in life. And what we see is that people are attracted by the CEO, the way that your CEO, our CEO
role
speaks
model,
out,
right?
makes a role model, makes his statements about black empowerment, makes statements about female, makes really strong statements about how do you want to be as a company, and how you want to be the people to treat each other, how we talk about mentorship, everything is like sort of guided. And then you, of course, need to filter that down. And that's the difficult part, because on top there, it's fine, but then you go down, and if you go more and more down, how can you then elaborate on the way the culture is changing?
But maybe also to make it more personal, when I started at Microsoft, I was in a technical team, I have a technical background, and I was the first woman on the team. I was also the youngest on the team, and I saw a lot of people around me that didn't look like me. I also didn't, I was not really like, okay, am I in the right place, right? Those are questions you're going to ask yourself. And also very important, especially with younger talent, I was very ambitious. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to make some steps in the first years that I was with the company. And you see, like, okay, but they are doing it in a certain style that will never be my style, right? So I am never going to do exactly what they do. However, maybe I can do the role or the job.
So what is the biggest change you've seen over the years? How many years have you been with Microsoft?
10.
And what would be the biggest change you've seen when it comes to these issues?
Well, the shift from diversity to inclusion, from how we look at it. But I think the other thing is this. I was the first one. And yes, we're still, if you look at female, there's more men working at Microsoft than women. But it's about sometimes being the first, right? And then you put a lot of pressure on people. If it's a second or a third, then people are more like, hey, okay, majority is white men, whatever you want to... that can be the case, yeah. But as soon as it starts to diversify, people say, okay, but not everyone is not one format. Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part also for other organizations, because it's those first who will also fail, who will also feel miserable at times, who will also maybe leave. So going over that kind of first bump of diversifying your teams is crucial.
Because it's also, we live, here in Holland and in the US and in a lot of countries with a very tight labor market, which is quite unusual after the economic crisis we had first. When the pandemic started, everybody thought, oh my, the sky is falling down. And no, the sky did not fall down. No. We have a very tight labor market, so it gets harder and harder for you guys. Yeah. Even in companies like yours that are in a strong position in the labor market, it must be tough.
Yeah, but it has to be the full story. And I think the full story is about, first question, can I work from home? And the people that are now coming to the market and youngsters with
it's no longer can I have a lease car, but
no, it's firstly, can we work from home and can we balancing out our lives? So if you talk about that specific age, I think the other part is, of course, what is your company doing? And it's not making the greatest product, but what do you actually do with the product?
What do you add?
What do you add with the product? Are you taking the products back after 5, 6, 7 years? So the whole concerning about what we are as a world today is much more important for that, and it's getting very important for all of us. But they are much more concerned about that fact too, and if the company is really adding to that. And
so these young employees are a driving force, like you described, are a driving force behind this change.
Yeah, definitely, because that is basically always been the case. When you joined Microsoft, you also changed that. When I joined at that time a distributor in Snake, it was also because you have that drive to put that flag somewhere, and in time and in age you turn that a little bit, you're getting a bit milder, and you seeing it a little bit more in perspective. But I think definitely when a company wants to drive innovations and that fits to a lifestyle or a way that we work, you want to hire the best talents. And I always, my personal mantra was always like, hire the best people. And it doesn't matter how they look like and what they are, because they have to contribute to the success that we all want to have together. I think if people say that, it's not always true, because they always do that because of the stereotyping of their company. So it's very challenging if you hire, for instance, in our personal case, I hired 2 ladies completely not out of the business. Took them in the business because we also had to be a challenger in this market.
So what were their skills? I mean, they're working in a tech company, you guys...
No skills, they had to learn everything about even what a mouse and a keyboard was. Okay. What can it do? What is Microsoft? Why is Microsoft important to Logitech's video collaboration? All these basic things why don't they know that? Yeah. Because they know, but they knew other things, and if they learn.
So what did they add to the company? I mean, what are the skills of these ladies?
Now, if you're going through all the phases, you are perceived better than anybody else because you are a role model, because you learned it in the way out. Secondly, they have other skills that convince people, because we're talking about a complete different way. It's now a part of working. It's not a technical thing anymore. So when everything going to be adopted, technology should work for us. It's not like that we have to understand how that is being connected, how that router is working. It's like you're putting a plug in there and the light goes on. Now that's the same thing when you want to do, in our case, a video call.
And I have a great example of that as well. Last 4 years, I managed a technical team of 22 people. And we hired in the beginning a lady with a communications background. And in tech, and you probably recognize this, is a lot of times you're being recognized for how much you know. It's a very, people in tech are usually very knowledgeable, and a certain expertise gives you a certain status. And I think, when I hired this lady, she had also very limited tech experience, a little bit more than, I guess, what you described. But she did awesome because she was maybe getting to 80% of the knowledge, but she was way better at transferring that knowledge to customers, for example, and how she talked about it. And therefore, it made us also rethink, hey, we're always setting the bar on, you need to at least have this exam and know this and so on. But actually, is that the best way or the only way that you can become successful in tech? And she really proved not. But back to my earlier point, there was a lot of convincing to the team why we hired her, right? You need to put in a lot of, people are, okay, I've always succeeded in my role because I know so much, and you're hiring someone who I don't really understand brings anything to the table. So again, the manager needs to really have the active dialogue, but she brings other things, and this is the reason, and
back it up.
There is no one way to do it, and so on.
Agree? I completely agree. That's also to me diversity. If you are in a tech world where all these techies are talking about these technical stuff, I'm also not a technical person. I knew nothing from video collaboration when I joined Logitech. Actually, what, and I come.
But you're smart enough to learn quickly.
But smart enough to understand how the things are working, and have the learning mindset, and being curious about how can we change it. And the great example was always because we had to move into an industry that was dominated by very technical skill set with people that never used the product, but it was very complicated, and that's why people never used it. And we made it simpler. And then you need simple people just to make it work.
Yeah, but then at the same time, you also still need the experts, right? So I don't think it's also in the messaging that is not a profile that will go away, but we're adding different flavors.
Add it to it and make that into a, like you make a team, you have different skill sets and functionalities, and you put that together, and you have a common goal and a vision, or vision and a goal, and then you can move forward with that.
In closing, back to the issue of diversity and inclusiveness. Where are we 5 years from now, Joost?
On that specific
What's going to be the
topic?
biggest change in the next 5 years? It's a little crystal ball, but look in the crystal ball.
Yeah. I'll take the tomorrow most of the time. But
tomorrow is a long time, right?
Tomorrow is already a long time. But I think in 5 years from here is. I think we will look at work as a much more, and I really mean knowledge workers, because other work, but specifically people in the way we business. I think that we will have a very digital way of working. Video will be imperative, will be used more and more everywhere. Also create that inclusion that people can work, live anywhere they want, and just log in and be connected. I think that will be a big trend and a big thing happening. So it will also equalizes work over the continent. So you can sit in South Africa and you can work for a Dutch company, but never have visited, and maybe even have that not equal most of the time, but a sort of a paycheck that also gives you a better life on that side of the world. So I think it will equalize out. Competition will be more worldwide continuously, because the technology is there to really support that way of living. And I think in that care, I think we will have much more feeling and also touch about the world around us, that we really think, okay, should we really do that? Can we not see it work differently? And then we care a little bit more about the world around us, which we all need, because otherwise we don't have an extra planet anymore.
What about you, Lisanne, 5 years from now?
I don't know what...
She will be? She will be four and a bit.
Yeah. So I would like to what do I wish for the world in 5 years? I cannot look into the future. Yeah, I think it's even in the way that you put it, the challenge of diversity and inclusion. I hope we can get to a state where we see it as an opportunity, and we really switch from this phase, which is needed, where we talk about differences, where we sometimes still think too much in labels, in categories, and so on, that we really make the shift in the world to talk about inclusion, and that it becomes of everyone. Because I think everyone is different. So it's not one group or one challenge to tackle. It should become something that's inevitable to think about for everyone. And I hope that people will start to feel that, and companies as well. Then we're in a good place, I think.
Fascinating times. Thank you, Joost. Thank you, Lisanne. And thank you for joining us for this meeting. Thank you so much. Welcome back. We're live in the studio here in Utrecht. You can still join us through Twitter, #SmartCom21. You can ask questions, make remarks, and we'll try to address some of these questions and remarks after the next short video. Because the previous one was about diversity and inclusion, but there's a different kind of diversity we haven't talked about and we will touch upon right now, which is how people work. They're very diverse when it comes to work styles. Some people like to work alone in a separate space. Other people like to be more social and work together with people and be with people, and all kinds of variations. At Poly, a company that helps corporations outfit their offices for the new circumstances in the office, came up with the idea of different personas, different lifestyles, different kinds of people, different personas. We have a short masterclass by people of Poly, Sebastian Hoogstads and Marcel Timmer, who will discuss this concept of personas. Very insightful. Enjoy it.
Today we're going to talk about personas, but first let me quickly introduce Poly to you. You might have never heard of the organization. Poly is the new name, and it's been existing since 2019 now for the merged organization ever since Polycom and Plantronics joined forces back in 2018, and since 2019 we're now called Poly, and we are still a manufacturer of hardware, and we offer the services on that hardware for care and maintenance, but we also do installation services. And I think at this moment in time it's safe to say that we are one of the largest UC endpoint manufacturers in the world. We manufacture all the way from tiny headsets to immersive rooms and everything you might need in between to make sure that your UC investment is actually adopted and works effectively. Now, from that working effectively perspective, today we're going to talk about personas. And personas is a key part of making sure that people can work effectively. Marcel, tell us a little bit more. What is personas? What is it that we're talking about?
What we have been doing at Poly is for more than a decade, we've been researching work styles in organizations. And what this means is that we ask large enterprises around the world on what is happening in working in what work is for them and their employees. And what we do and what we did is we found out that there are 6 dominant work styles in every company.
It doesn't matter what type, what vertical.
Yeah, there's always a certain distribution of these work styles in a company. You're right. Typically, they are the same in cultures, in countries. Really? There's a very typical view of what type of work styles are available in a company. For example, 28% of people in a company are typically office collaborators. People that sit behind a desk most of the time, work with a PC, a phone, their mobile device, and collaborate.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what vertical you look at, whether it's finance or it's manufacturing or it's...
There is always exceptions, but
Clearly.
these are typical dominant figures.
The general rules.
And this helps a lot. I mean, what is the value of doing this research? Is it helps us help customers in finding out what brings value to their employees.
Yeah, because I think if I look what is happening in practice, I see companies sometimes order really 5,000 headsets of one type.
Exactly, yeah. And that can't be right. Unless you're in a very specific industry with very specific jobs in your company, that I could imagine that could be possible. But imagine you have a company with a receptionist, a finance department, a HR department, and
people on the road,
whatever, right? Depending on the type of industry, you might have a lot of other people around it. But there is these functions in a company that are typically there, right? HR, finance, typically there in any company.
Yeah.
These people have a specific way of doing their work. They do their work in a specific location. They do it with specific tools, with access to specific IT tools. And this makes work styles.
Right. Okay.
So if a company reach out to us and say, we have 5,000, we need 5,000 headsets of one model, we always go back and ask, are you really sure? Because that would be very atypical.
So why is that so important? Why is it so important to make sure that the right work style has the right tool? Why is that important?
Because if you provide the wrong tool, people won't use it. Right?
So you're wasting your money.
Yeah, I could, for example, have a sales organization and ask my people to travel across the world to sell my product. I don't give them a bike, right? If it's a local sales function, I give them a car, right? If it's a global function, I give them a really good deal on taking planes. So you need to find out what your people need and what there is to offer. And what a lot of people think is that this is an overkill, right? Oh my goodness, I have 1,000 people in my company. There's no way I'm going to ask all 1,000 what kind of product they want to have and all kinds of flavors and choices. A total overkill and an overwhelming experience for the person that needs to execute this.
Yeah, and maintain it, care for it.
Exactly.
Impossible.
And our work style research makes their lives easy.
Yeah, because it drills it down, right? We don't have 1,000 individuals. We effectively have 6 type of roles. That's what we're talking about.
Exactly. And for these roles, we know what works and what does not work, and what these people typically need to have a good work day, to be effective and productive.
And that's perhaps also very important, to have a professional communication with their customers, right? I mean, they too need to communicate outside of their organization. They need to talk to customers, they need to talk to stakeholders.
I tell our customers typically that we do not provide toys, we provide tools. If you look at our headsets, they look different than a consumer grade headset. And that's because they are designed with a microphone boom to make sure that any noise from your environment is blocked out.
Or any personal conversation from your neighbor.
Comes through on your line.
Exactly. Okay, that makes sense. If we look at the situation today, the world today, with the corona pandemic still hitting us, is persona research still relevant, and why?
It's super relevant. The latest round of our research, we started just before the pandemic hit us, and we actually extended the period of our research to make sure that we could also map the impact of the pandemic. And what we found out that, remember I just mentioned this 28% of office collaborators? For these people, the world has changed significantly. With offices closed, people needing to work from home. These people have gone through a significant shift where they do not have an office with a clear setup and clear tools. They needed to go to home. And what was really interesting is to find out that only 13% of these people have a dedicated place at home where it's quiet to work. That means that all these other people sit at home or somewhere else, typically in a very noisy environment.
But these people still talk to your customers, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we all know that in these times, conversations are more critical than ever, right? Where there's a lot of pressure on performance, delivery issues in all kinds of industries, right? Customer service departments, contact centers that are under high pressure to perform.
Yeah.
And then having a good conversation where you have absolute confidence that you can hear the person on the other side and the person on the other side can also hear you.
Yeah.
That brings real value.
Yeah. Excellent. Good examples. Thank you. To the point. Today, if you want to start with personas as an organization, what is it you can do?
It's really straightforward. Don't think of this as another big sales tool or a big complex thing. No, I would say for any company, just sit down, schedule 15, 30 minutes with some colleagues in the company that really know the company, and think about the people that have distinct jobs.
Salespeople versus finance, for example.
Exactly. But don't think about job titles. I mean, that's a big pitfall. So when you bring HR people to the table, prevent them from categorizing people in job titles, because that does not make up work styles. If we go back to these finance and HR people, they do the same work, different titles. So really think about how people do their work, where they do this work, and what tools they need, what they use.
Excellent. Excellent. We also have online tools, right, that people can access?
Yeah. So this first step I just mentioned is really just a pragmatic way of thinking about, what do we have? Do we fit into certain areas? But a really good step is to take our survey. That is online. The first step is doing it yourself.
But so you can analyze your own work style and you get an impression of what to do.
Yeah, and you will also get an impression of how easy and quick this is. Because it's really quick and easy. And then you can quickly reach out to us. I mean, we need to do it, but it only takes a few minutes and it doesn't take a lot of sales pitches, etc. The tool will prove its value to you. We will set up a link for your employees. You can choose how many you want to share this link with. People fill out the survey and you will have a dashboard to see what personas occur most in your organization.
Oh, excellent. So it's not us doing the research. We enable an organization to do the research.
Exactly. And then once that's done, we'll help you understand what this means. Right? What kind of tools, not definitely talking about our solutions, so specific headset models or whatever. No, what does this mean? If you have a lot of road warriors, as we call them, right? The typical field salespeople, those we call road warriors. These people need a mobile device. So think about Bluetooth. So it's easy to connect to your cell phone, to your PC, whatever. But also, these people are typically in the car, right? So you want to take calls when you're in the car, but you also don't want to be isolated from your environment completely. So maybe a monaural earpiece would be very efficient for these people. And those kinds of conversations we can then have after doing this survey.
Yeah, because we can then help, okay, now we have done the research, okay, what does that mean in practice? How can we actually help these people get the right tools and productivity tools? That's excellent. Okay, thank you, Marcel. Is there any specific examples you can mention where we've done this and where we have seen this work, like in banking?
I always welcome people to just give me a call because in certain industries, companies, we can shortcut all of this. For example, banking, right? In banking, traditionally, DECT technology has been the preferred solution.
Why is that?
Because DECT is highly secure, right? It's either 128 or 256-bit encryption on the line, so it's very secure. And in this technology, there's just two flavors. Either there's the solution where you have an office stand that connects to your desk phone, PC, and your mobile, if you like. Or the other option is a very mobile USB dongle that you can connect to your laptop and leave it in. Take your laptop to the office, take your laptop to home. And your headset will be secure and mobile.
Well, that would even allow like a contact center employee to work from home should it be needed, any type of workplace, you log into the organization VPN and off you go. I mean, you have a dongle in the back of your PC, you can just use your own configuration.
Yeah, definitely.
Fast and efficient. Excellent. Okay, so even in those kind of environments, personas and what they do is still extremely relevant.
Still extremely relevant, but it's
the choices are a bit more
exactly limited. It's restricted. We know from our experience, from our know-how, what works best for these very specific industries.
Right. Excellent. Thank you, Marcel, for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you, viewers, for taking the time to listen to us and have a look at our story. Again, if you want to do this research yourself, reach out to either Marcel, Timmer, or myself. We will clearly share our names and addresses during this presentation. The links will also be shared with you, and you can access the materials should you need to and should you want to. Thank you for your time, and we hope you have a productive day today. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Digital acceleration was on the screen, and keep customers happy. We're talking about customer engagement in this next segment of this summit. We have a number of very interesting guests, and we have a couple of big topics. What's next for customer engagement? How are customers interacting with brands, and what role do bots and artificial intelligence play to optimize customer engagement? Let me start on my left side with a short, and Anne Bakker with Enreach. I saw on your website, one of your promises is create contact magic. Introduce yourself, if you will, and where's the magic, Anne?
Thanks. Yeah, Anne Bakker, founder of Bot Squad. Since a year, we are now part of Enreach. At Bot Squad, we created a platform for building conversational applications. So those are turnkey solutions for bots, basically. And where do we create contact magic? I think this is where some of the magic is happening or will be happening, adding automation or adding conversational AI to conversations.
Give me one example.
I think a really nice one is, recently my car broke down. If you then call the Wegenwacht, the ANWB, it starts with a conversation.
That's AAA.
Yeah, exactly. It starts with a conversation via voice. You call them. They ask you a couple of questions. You get an SMS.
You get somebody on the line, actually.
No, this is actually a bot. Okay. Where you just you indicate you have a problem. It's followed up by an SMS, and you add some more information, and then you get a little card that actually shows you when help is arriving. And I think that's for me at least, that was magic. No longer you have questions about where is this car. You can actually see it coming your way, and it's a really nice play between going from voice, going to another medium, SMS or WhatsApp or any kind of chat message, and then creating a rich experience with a map.
And you don't mind that you don't get somebody, a live, real person on the line?
Well, in this case,
you don't mind.
Well, maybe if I was sentimental, I would. But I think if your car breaks down, it's okay to get a bot on the line if it's followed up by action. So I think the frustration usually is getting trapped in these situations where you've got an urgent issue or you want to get help. But this bot keeps you in some kind of a trapped situation, and you won't get out. And I think with these narrow conversations, people don't mind getting a bot or getting a human. The thing that matters is getting help in this case.
Yeah, being treated well.
Exactly.
Right. Jasper Maters with Audio Codes, same thing. Introduce yourself briefly. And I read on your website that your goal is immediate innovation for your existing contact center platform. That's a mouthful.
It's quite a mouthful. I need to go and look where that is on the website. I hope it's not front and center, but it does make sense. So we're in the same ecosystem here, I think, on the table, and voice AI and automation of customer contact is a very important part of what we do, and innovation very much is so as well. But for large companies, institutions, dropping in these new technology islands into their operations, it's not always that straightforward. There's a lot of things you need to take into account: existing infrastructure, contact centers, underlying applications, and part of what we do is enabling that you can bring this innovation into your company or your organization while it all interoperates well and efficiently high customer support levels, and it all interoperates and works together. So that's part of what we do.
Okay. There also Gert-Jan Huizer. Your slogan with your company is very brief but powerful. Trust the future.
Yeah, isn't that great?
Well, explain to us why. Not everybody trusts the future.
No, not everybody does, but maybe they should.
Okay.
Because the past is behind us, so let's look forward and trust the future. I'm Gert-Jan Huizer, heading up the EMEA activities for Mavenir Enterprise Connect. Mavenir is really a provider of end-to-end network solutions in the cloud for communication service providers. What Mavenir has been doing lately is add a lot of communication pieces to its portfolio. So they've acquired Telestex, that's where I came from. That's a communication platform provider. The APIs you hear a lot about, building blocks for communication. That's what we deliver. And besides that, also communication solutions and customer engagement tooling. And trust the future, coming back to that specific piece. We are enabling customer service providers. So what we do is we enable the party that provides trust to enterprise customers in the world.
Give me one example. You don't have to mention your client, but what kind of companies do you help and what do you do for them?
For example, we help companies like Proximus in Belgium building communication solutions for its enterprise customers.
Proximus is, for those who are not familiar.
That's the incumbent carrier, the telecom carrier in Belgium.
Okay. And you do what for them?
We provide them the building blocks to create communication solutions. So, for example, when they want to have a very simple SMS API for appointment reminders, that's what they can build very easily with the platform we provide.
Okay, wonderful. Enrico Karsten, Anywhere 365, we've seen you before this afternoon. Then we discussed the issue, reduce all unnecessary dialogues. That was a little bit negative. Now I have a more positive slogan, enhance business communications. How do you guys enhance people's business communication?
To be honest, I think that reducing unnecessary dialogues is kind of positive.
Okay.
But
you're right. Yeah? I got you. Yeah.
But we were talking in a former meeting about reducing unnecessary dialogues, and that we think that time is, in essence, the most valuable part for our collective people in organizations. The technology that we offer to do so is enriching business communications. But the fair point is that we've been seen as a contact center software delivery party over the course of the last years, while we in essence deliver contact center sort of technology in terms of all communications channels that are available, but we deliver them to everybody that needs them in an enterprise organization. So not solely in a contact center silo, but give them and spread them out of the organization. So the whole organization can benefit from the technology that we offer. And to come back to the unnecessary dialogues, make sure that all of the people are loosened up from the burden of having too many unnecessary dialogues and get more value of their time. That's in essence.
Okay. Let me start with you, Anne. You mentioned your experience when your car broke down, you called ANWB, the Dutch AAA, and you had a good experience. I'm the kind of guy, when I'm on a website and I have a problem, I go to chat and it says, hi, I'm Jill, or hi, I'm Paul, or I'm whatever. But that's not Paul or Jill, no, it's a bot.
Yeah.
That annoys me. Am I the only one who annoys this?
No, I think it is a trend. On the other hand, people are also experiencing the other side, which is they call the company and they're in the queue, right? So you now have a situation where either you're going to be waiting in the queue, and that really annoys me, or you go to a website and you chat, and the bot will ask you some questions. As long as it leads to a solution, either by the bot or a human, I think it's okay. And if it is a shorter path to getting my problem solved, it is a good experience.
But quite often you go around in circles. You have a problem and you type in the problem, my package has not been delivered or whatever. Yeah. And I don't understand your question. Well, my package is lost. Yeah. I don't understand your question. You go around, it sounds familiar, right? You go around in circles.
Yeah.
So one way or the other, something goes wrong, at least when you want to engage me as a customer. You're being a travel agent or a car company or a computer company, you don't engage me in a positive way.
No, I agree. And I think this is where we have to improve and where we have improved as an industry. I think the whole term "I don't understand you," of course, is strange, because either I wasn't trained for this, or
I have similar wording.
But they always say,
at least
I don't understand you. While in reality, of course, it's not understanding at all. It's just trying to classify or trying to somehow find out from your sentence if it can somehow route it to the right location, and that's not working. And I think this is where we have to make sure that if this happens once, it's okay. If it happens twice, it's annoying. The third time around,
bye bye.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to you have to somehow route people to another to a human at that point, to say, well, at this point I can't figure out what you're trying to, what you're after, but now you're being handled by a human.
And I guess, Jasper, it also has to do with the amount of money your clients want to spend. If they don't want to spend the money to have enough people on the phone, you have to do it with a bot. And if you don't want to spend too much on the bot, you have to do it in a poor way. So you run the risk of having clients, customers be unhappy or maybe even angry.
I think there's different aspects to what we're discussing here, and we should separate them. The first question you asked was very interesting. Am I alone in this? No, you're not alone in this, but there's different groups of people that engage companies in different ways. And there are groups of people that are other than your own group, for example, young generation of digital natives that are completely used to interfacing with technology to get the answers that they want, either by web or contacting a bot.
Our kids are definitely smarter than their dad.
And nowadays also by voice interface. So every person in the world knows how to speak, well, almost everyone. And that's a universal interface to technology that are people starting to use. So yes, you had a poor experience and you don't like talking to technology, that's fine. But there's other groups of people that do. And there's another aspect of the shelf life of a bad experience, which is significantly higher than the shelf life of a positive experience. What we are creating today with technology is very increases in customer experience, and believe me, they are there. And this is the only way how we can bring our technology to market. And then there's poor IT, which you seem to have come across in some instances. I mean, a package company that doesn't understand that your package has not arrived in a bot. That's unthinkable, right? I can show you a dozen examples of the complete opposite, where people are delighted by 3 steps they can skip that they normally would have to go through with an agent who doesn't really understand everything either. And that's going straight to where you want to be, and within a second you have a WhatsApp confirmation on your phone that you have what you called to do has been accomplished.
Yeah, so this is not technology, this is the process
that
is in place. So what he is annoyed by is the fact that he already emphasizes on the fact that this bot will probably not answer his questions, so he wants to go straight through to the right person.
Yeah, which can,
I tried several times, after going around in circles, I did just X.
Yeah.
Assuming the system says, we need to get somebody on the line. And Jill saying, hi, I'm Jill and I'm a real person and can I help you? No, I don't understand your question.
Even that real person, believe me, at the background, that real person, in many of instances, there will be a bot on the background helping that real person, listening in on the conversation. That person doesn't know what he's talking about either, but when you say, my package hasn't been delivered, they get a prompt in front of them, please help him with his lost package, press this button. So you're talking to a person, but he's still being helped.
I think to be honest, I have quite a lot of bad experiences with a big Dutch airline.
Mm-hmm.
Used to have a great service.
Is it a royal one?
I don't know. Not lately, I think. But at least, so I still love the company, so nothing about that. But the experience that you have there, talking to real life persons on different channels, with no execution on the right question, not a quick follow-up, but hours of spending before things get resolved, is far more annoying to me than when it comes down to, a little bit more time spent with a bot or whatever.
Depends on your frequent flyer miles. And the more you have, the different agents you get on the phone, believe me.
So that's another thing, well, not to hang into this specific example, but frequent flyer. So it's basically about how to use technology, right? So I have filled in my details of my whole family, I think 22 times already. Then I contact them via whatever, WhatsApp or by phone. They recognize my number because they welcome me. hi, you are blah 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 blah. Okay, and
Welcome.
then the first contact that I talk to
Yeah.
is gonna require every detail that is already in the system. So yeah, that about annoyance. This is wrong use of technology. Yeah, then you better not use it.
Does it sound all familiar to you?
It sounds familiar, but I think there are also companies who do it much better.
Okay.
And they already have engaged in conversations, more or less.
What's the secret then, that they do it better than other ones?
They really focus on the conversation itself. So they want to make it feel like very personal, and in the back they do what came forward already. They gather a lot of information. It's all about gathering a lot of information and putting it in front of the person who is in contact with you. And then it doesn't matter which channel is being used. Preferably the channel the customer prefers to use at that time, at that moment, for this type of conversations. And when you do that, and you also create a history in that communication, then you almost engage in a personal relationship between company and the consumer, and that's really where you would like to be. Then it doesn't matter when you reach out to a customer with a proposal like, I've got a nice T-shirt for you, and it is your size, it can be delivered tomorrow. Then you like that kind of advice, and then it's not just pushing. Like some big selling organization, but it's part of the conversation, and that's why conversations in apps like Instagram and Facebook are so effective, because you think they are your friend, and I think that's something that really helps for companies to make this interaction much more better, effective, and rewarding.
Yeah, the thresholds of IT are getting lower and lower, and technology is not the stopping point. It's more and more it's execution and how you create intelligent, customer engaging business process. Yeah. We need smart people
and
to use the technology.
At first it might be a little bit cumbersome, like your experience, but all those machine learning engines in the back, after 3 times they should have learned that this is not the right way, and the next caller they will get a better experience. And that's
hopefully
that's what
the next time I'm calling them, said, we recognize this number. There's also a gentleman who was not happy the last time.
They don't answer you.
Try to make them happy.
So one of the things we deliver is we measure your voice while you're on the phone. When you're irritated, the things that we do with you are different.
I can hide it very well.
And your bad experience is noted in big data, because we know how many negative conversations there have been.
But that's a feature I have to buy from you. If I want a feature measuring, my tone of voice, I mean, that's something I have to pay for if I buy it from one of you guys, right? So that's a quality issue, right?
Yeah.
So better beware, this gentleman is not happy, or this lady is happy, or okay.
But still only valuable if an organization is ready to onboard this type of technology, in essence. So all the people are educated rightly, the processes are in place, they know their customer, for one. Otherwise, this technology is not the holy grail that they're looking for.
I think that's a very important one. Education for the companies, education for the consumers who are using it. I think that's essential in making use of that new technology in the most efficient and best way. That's an important topic. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit, Jasper, about healthcare. I mean, we are in this pandemic. There are, huge amounts of people who have questions or are angry or scared or whatever. They're calling into hospitals, insurance companies, whatever. So that's big business for you guys, potentially, right? But you better do it right, because it's sometimes for people a life or death situation where they're calling about. I mean, talk a little bit about healthcare and your opportunities there.
In a real crisis in which we are now, where you see peak loads on healthcare systems, it is hugely important. But you must realize that an infrastructure isn't used to quadrupling the traffic all of a sudden. Those things are not designed for it. So the last few years have been about enabling those systems to take on those volumes. And then when you have the technology in place, still to have the live agents available to talk to all these people without 15-20 minutes waiting time is another huge challenge. And this is where the technology does come in. So you can take all the easy questions, or the questions that are there the most, and you can automate them in an efficient way so people can quickly get the information or a transaction that they need. It's a great way of doing that to enable those situations. And then intelligent call routing of those cases that really require expert knowledge or an expert interaction, routing that to the right place together with all the information that the customer has already provided, the patient in this case, I guess, and delivering that to the right person. These have, over the last 2 years, have been major items for us. That's in healthcare alone. And that's even not talking about all those agents in contact centers that could no longer sit together in contact centers, that all of a sudden had to work from home. So all those.
Yeah, so healthcare is, I would say, behind its own tail for this matter. We were referring in the former meeting on the time that we are already spending on the new world of work for decades now, and I, for one, have been trying together with all my competitors and colleagues in the market to push also healthcare as an environment towards another way of working, and to see how much more efficiency we can adopt in the whole processes of offering healthcare. And then there were always good reasons to do not so, like legislation, of course, insurance companies, but also the belief in trust internally, systems, personal information, blah blah blah. All big challenges, but still they needed to be to overcome. They postponed that time over time, and now we come in a crisis in which they suddenly can adopt. So it happens, it really is happening now. So that's good news, but they already should have had it in place to cope with this crisis. So that's a little bit ambiguous.
I had the same experience. I called for a vaccination recently, and I noted, I spent about 17 minutes, and it was an efficient conversation, but somehow they needed 17 minutes to ask me like all these no questions, like did you just no. It's almost like a bot both ways, right? Yeah. The agent was asking me questions like a bot, and I was answering like a bot. This is where I figured, like, okay, this could have been automated, freeing up a lot of resources.
Exactly. Yeah. We've done this exactly, not in Holland, in the UK. We have automated this process with bots. It's hugely efficient.
Midway conversation, because I think that was a trick. So they open as a human. In some way, we've identified what to do, and then midway conversation is this robotic questionnaire, which could have been, I think.
Yeah, but the whole process, when you look at invitations for the vaccinations, why not use the technology of sending a WhatsApp message and then a reply to a calendar, which instantly replies back again with a time and a place?
Can't be that complicated, right?
No, that cannot be complicated, but then we also need to tap into the population that we are reaching with this technology. And then if I look to my parents, so I don't know if they would adopt this type of reaching out.
I understand, but when 60% of the people do, then it opens up a lot of capacity for the other 40% to make that call or do something to get in contact with them.
That's true.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. It's a mix of old and new ways, and that's what companies have to think about, how to balance the various way of communicating with the customers and make it a good experience for everyone.
Let's zoom out a little bit and talk about a little bit more about innovation in general. History learns that during crises, pandemics, wars, economic downturns, innovation accelerates. Take the 2008 banking crisis. I mean, big companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft have grown tremendously in those years since this huge crisis. We may see the same thing. A question for does the pandemic, does Corona eventually, we can see that later on looking back, but will it accelerate innovation, for example, in your field?
I think, yeah, for sure. I mean, it forces people to be online, so it already creates a bigger population of people that you can create magic for, more or less. I think that the downside is for companies is trying to work on the innovation, because for instance, us joining Enreach was in the mid of this whole lockdown, and that makes it a lot harder to get things done. And so it's both
a
ways.
Big company.
Because it's a big company and you have no way to physically meet, which makes your onboarding a lot slower. And I think for lots of last Friday we tried to do kind of a hackathon online. That's completely different from doing a hackathon with people on a table. And so it on the one hand it creates opportunities for new things for new areas to be viable, because now there's scale. On the other hand, I think it's harder for companies to innovate because I think the tooling is still not optimum for really creative processes. I think at this point.
I would say the process for your company, what COVID is speeding up is more the adoption of the technology.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
In which the technology gets more enriched by intelligence and then gets more complemented also by Charles, instead of forcing you guys to innovate more.
Yeah.
I would say maybe the networking guys would innovate more now because they need to stretch their capabilities in terms of workload, but
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of conversation about customer contact, but just in the broader field of enterprise communications, like how companies communicate using telephony and video nowadays, and the pandemic has sent shockwaves of innovation through the marketplace. And one aspect is capacity. Indeed, all of a sudden everyone working from home. We don't have the systems for this. So there's been a lot of enabling that for us. But we have our vision ahead, of course, of the new way of work. What is it going to settle down to? So you see when the pandemic comes in waves, when the wave goes down, the traffic goes up again. How are these things going to be corresponding? Are we going to keep driving back to the office whenever the pandemic is less? Or are we really pushing through with structural homework for certain tasks and live meeting for other environments? How is this going to be adopted in the marketplace? I know what it's like for me as a company and my ecosystems of IT partners who are all a bit ahead of the curve, but the market at large, where it's going to settle, is to me a big question mark. What is it going to look like, this new landscape?
I would say the biggest innovation that this pushes is the transformation of how we look at organizations and what this really is in terms of knowledge, onboarding knowledge, commit to knowledge, and how they are commit. Well, a big example is what is called independent professionals, for instance, and how the focus on a European scale is there to force autonomous countries to legalize the way independent workers can contribute towards the organizations that we now know and support them. So maybe this is English words don't come up very easily. Independent workers are the biggest growing workforce in the European zone, and we are only supporting these by embarking their knowledge on a contractor's base. Well, they don't have support for education, for insurance, for finance and stuff like that. And I really think that we are on the, if it comes down to innovation from not a technology perspective.
So they may be engaged with not necessarily with your company, because
I think we're gonna see huge organizations that are not organized anymore by the structures that we know, like management and board of advisors, etc., but just a whole collective,
atomized in a way. I mean, all different
collective of independent workers that contribute towards the same goal. Yeah, I think that's
an issue.
Is that an issue?
Yeah.
I don't know. Why would it be?
Well,
no, but you know, the thing about organizations is organizations are fluid by definition. COVID is now forcing everybody to work in a different way. The environment changes again in a short time. Part of it will move back to the old world, will be a hybrid world. But I think what we are looking at now is that the hype is a little bit over. We have to get to the new equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
And in the new equilibrium, everybody is, a lot of organizations are going to work completely different. A lot of organizations will go back to the way they were working before, and I think specifically knowledge workers, and that's the group probably you're referring to. That will totally change. Production workers, I think that will go back instantly to, because that's normal. And in this new normal, I think what will significantly have changed is the way we communicate within companies, between companies, on a worldwide scale. Because, for example, what I expect is that business flying will never go back to original levels. That I'm going on my first trip next week, and normally I was in a plane.
Or business convention
all the time
in Hawaii,
and yeah, so that really changes. So and all the technology.
Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
No, but all the
conventions in Vegas,
all the technology you guys talked about video and everything, it was already there, but we have now adopted it. We are using it in all kind of different fashions. We are able to connect it to all kind of applications. So from that point of view, it's great, but it is a new balance. A new balance.
I do think that human interaction in meetings is going to be just about that, human interaction. Not so much about production or working. It is going to be about meeting. But there's other dimensions here. For example, large groups of people. The Las Vegas convention with 10,000 people. I don't know. Microsoft does 70,000 used to do a year, I think, coming together in affairs. Forget it. It's 25. It's 30. This is going to be the new normal. Smaller groups, and when you meet, it's about interaction. Coming to decisions, catching up with each other, making sure everyone is looking pointed the right direction. Forget about working. We'll work at home, in our home office. We can be incredibly productive.
Brainstorm, creativity, that's where you see people come together again.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for all kind of regular stuff, it's not.
But then back finally to customer engagement. One of my favorite, catchphrases about marketing and customer engagement: you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Everybody knows it, right? And everybody knows it's true, and everybody knows it's important. Going forward, how do we, live up to that catchphrase? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. How do you help your customers, giving customers that experience?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you started the discussion with your bad experience, how you got trapped, and I think that's definitely not a magical experience. No. But I think there's also all kinds of
magical solutions.
Well, we have the technology to make it a lot better. I think we are lifting this technology now from an innovation space, and also due to COVID, to a kind of production space where it's really adding value. And I'm sure that. By focusing on the dialogue and by focusing on the experience, we can create those magical moments. For me, for instance, the fact that I can just, with a WhatsApp message, book a tire change for my car, for instance, I really like it because I can just send the message, put it down, and I get a confirmation later. I don't have to be in a call for a long time. So it's been really effective in certain parts, and I hope we can keep pushing these good experiences.
And there are forces at play, there's generation shifts in play. Younger generations, talk to young people, they'll tell you, I don't want to talk to anyone on the phone. I don't even pick up my phone when it rings, even when I know who it is. I don't like phone conversations. I want interactions, very efficient interactions that provide me what I want. It's the new world, Sean.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a dilemma. Because on the one hand, what you've seen in the past and nowadays still, a lot of innovators, they try to bring their products forward in a better fashion. It's never the best customer experience, but it's needed to learn from the experience and to really bring innovation to the next level. So when it is when the customer interaction is really extremely important for your company, I think you have to be very careful. Yeah. So you have to test it out and make sure that it works and that at least the largest part of the interaction is positive. But on the other hand, you also have to create an environment in which you can make mistakes and learn from the mistakes and really innovate. So therefore, I'm saying it's a little bit of a dilemma. And I agree with your statement that the first time has to be right.
It's like in personal life. I mean, when you meet people within seconds, it's a great book, the book Blink. Talks a lot about it. I mean, when I meet you, after 2 or 3 seconds, I do have an impression of you, and you have an impression of me. Yeah. And that's crucial.
Yeah. I think what is crucial is that you know your customer, basically, and then add up to what you know of that customer and the way that you're gonna engage with them. So the way you use technology to engage with them, the way that you help them with the right people, and on the other part, what I think is important is also nothing to do with technology properly, is that support or servicing customers. I see a lot of organizations, and also within our own organization, some people that tend to just feel that service and support is just a matter of fact, it's fact of life, it's just part of the deal. Instead of that, it's
not core business.
You need to understand that it's part of the experience of your customer. So that needs to be embedded in the culture and in the way you engage with customers. Otherwise, this first impression will sometimes be okay, but most of the times not be predictable. And that's, I think, one of the dangers.
Well, it's up to you to make, to increase the chance that it will be a positive experience, right?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Our next guest wrote a book called Punk CX, which was about customer experience. He has a book out now, Punk XL, which stands for Experience Leadership. He seeks to explore what it means and takes to deliver a great experience at different levels. And he says, because he's a consultant also, he said, I help established, open-minded, ambitious, service and growth-focused firms grow their businesses by working with them across a number of areas. Please listen to Adrian Swinsko.
Welcome, everybody. One of my favorite stories about transitions and big changes is about the introduction of the car more than 100 years ago. Back then, Henry Ford was one of the first ones to switch from a horse carriage to a horse carriage with an engine. Remember? And actually, the first car still looked like a horse carriage. With us today is Adrian Swinsko. And I'd like to hear from Adrian where we are in the transition when it comes to, for example, the way we treat customers and think about customers. Talking about the transition nowadays, everybody's talking about technology, and we should talk about technology and AG and AI and whatnot. But how do we actually treat our customers? Are we still in the age of the horse carriage? Are we gradually switching to the horse carriage with an engine? Are we a little further along, the old Chevys and maybe even Tesla? So I'd like to hear from Adrian Swinsko about it. Please introduce yourself briefly, Adrian. You wrote 2 books. Show them to us so that people know what you've been talking about and what you've been writing. And let's say do a 15-minute introduction, then we have a little chat. Floor is yours, Adrian.
Thank you,
and
Charles.
thank you for being us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Charles, for that introduction. And I'll show you the books in a second. And I love the kind of content that we've heard about before. People talking about technology, people talking about platforms and ecosystems, and you talked about AR and IR and VR and all these different sort of things, and it's all fascinating. But yes, we are talking about customer experience and what the kind of where the game has shifted to, and I think we're now talking about, rather than talking about customer experience, we need to talk about experience leadership. Because I think that's a bigger game. And I think if you allow me, I'll tell you a bit of a backstory to that, how I got to that, and it'll bring in the books and everything else. So the backstory to it is that, and this is where I met Rob, shortly after I published this book called Punk CX back in sort of May, June, kind of 2019, I met Rob. He asked me to come. He saw the book and he was like, "Oh my God, come and talk at API days." And we ended up having a rare old time. I remember kind of like being on stage and getting everybody on in the audience to pull their punk face and stick their fingers up to the camera. I have a picture of that. It's beautiful. I think people kind of loved it because it never been done before. In fact, I'd never tried it before, but it was a kind of cool kind of moment. But the story about the Punk CX is that it was born, the idea was born back in December 2017. And it was born out of frustration because I remember speaking to a friend of mine, Oshin, and we're both in sort of in the experience space, and I was excited by the level of activity and enthusiasm and movement and things in that whole customer service, customer experience sort of space. But I was frustrated about how much significant improvement there had been to outcomes. Were we as customers getting better service or better experiences? And I was frustrated that actually that didn't seem to be the case. And then I started thinking about it a bit more. And when I was talking to Oshin, I sort of I had frustration. I blurted out, "Oh, I wish somebody would do something a bit more punk." almost to move the dial, as it were. And I thought about that. We were drinking Guinness at the time, and it's not great for memory. It's really nice kind of like occasion, but I promptly forgot that idea. And then it popped back into my head a few months later, and then I started thinking about it. I'm a fan of punk music, so I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, let's think about punk. Where does punk come from? Now, punk exploded out of the back of progressive rock in the 1970s. Now, regardless of whether you're a fan of progressive rock, you have to concede that it was quite self-indulgent, very interested in its own virtuosity and musicality and all these different sort of things, and got accused in many parts of being guilty of disappearing up its own backside, right? And punk took this attitude to be like, we want to take a DIY, democratic, back to basics approach. Like anybody can pitch in and have a go. Dare to be different, all about heart and emotion. And I love that because it is an open sort of thing. And I thought about the experience space, and it struck me that the experience space then and still now exhibits similar characteristics as to prog rock in the 1970s. It's potentially overly codified, certified, benchmarked, metric, frameworked, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And if that's true, then what would a punk version of CX look like? And that was the frame behind this whole book. And it was styled around, so we wrote it and we go like, well, if you want to write something which is punk based, you can't write 50,000 words of black ink on white paper because that's just not very punk, right? So you have to write something which is, in line with that. So we wrote something which was very much track inspired by album based. So it's very visual. So it's all very kind of short and to the point, very punchy. And that was a challenge for people to do better work, to be better, to be more creative in order to drive these better outcomes that we're all looking for. So that was back in sort of 2019, and the book landed. It finds its own audience. It's not for everybody. It makes some people a bit uncomfortable, kind of so on and so forth. And that's fine. But then the pandemic arrived and everything changed. And what was fascinating, that in May of 2020, a friend of mine, Joel, sent me an email. He said, and they were right in the midst of the first sort of like set of lockdowns. My friend Joel can turn around and he said, it's amazing to see how much punk CX is going on. And what he meant by that was how everybody was forced to strip things back to their core essence and focus on doing the things that they had to do and getting them done quickly. Things, we talked about the acceleration that's taken place over the course of the last 18, 20 months. Things that would normally have taken 5 or 6 years to get done in an enterprise sense have sometimes taken kind of like 5 months or 5 weeks to get done, because people just stripped away all the crap and just focus on getting stuff done. And so I thought that was a fascinating time. It was, it was worrying, there was a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of concern going on around by that time. But I was watching as well about all these things going, and it felt like there was like tectonic plates moving in that whole experience domain. And it struck me middle of last year that we talk about customer experience, we talk about employee experience, we talk about other things, but actually it seemed to me that there's this quadfurcation and beyond going on with the experience. I looked the word up. It is a word, quadfurcation. People are more familiar with bifurcation, but there's a trifurcation and a quadfurcation, and then there's you can just keep going. And what I mean by that is that actually I think experience is starting to be the domain is starting to split into customer experience, employee experience. There's the stakeholder stuff, and then there's also this thing around the experience of the leader or leadership experience as being that connective tissue that pulls everything together and orchestrates the parts. And so I think all this stuff has been emerging over the last couple of years now, and it's been driven by the pandemic, the acceleration of all these different trends in the pandemics. And you fold in remote work and hybrid ways of working and technology, distributed technology, and all these different sort of things and platforms. And we've been forced down this route. But like we kind of say was that in terms of creativity, the worst thing you can do to a creative or a designer is give them a blank sheet of paper. Because creativity, the best creativity is driven by constraints. And what the pandemic has done is put constraints on us and forced us to change things, and sometimes rapidly. And so with all this sort of stuff that's been going on, I don't think it's sufficient any longer to talk about customer and employee experience as being separate things. And I think we need to talk about experience in the round. Because we talk a lot about market leadership, we talk a lot about brand leadership, we talk about business leadership, we talk about team leadership, technological leadership, all these different sort of things, even, all these different things. But I actually don't think that we talk about experience leadership and what that means and what it means to at all these different kind of levels, because ultimately that's what we aspire to. Those are the kind of that's the position that we all want to kind of reach. Particularly if we're going to deliver the outcomes and reach the heights that we all desire. So I started thinking about that. Actually, I started thinking about, and funnily enough, I started thinking about that over the course of the last year. But then started really working on what that kind of meant, or what I thought that meant, over the course of this year. And I'm happy to say that if this is the first album, then the second album has just come out, and it looks like this. So they're like cousins. And so Punks XL is a new book which is like its predecessor, like Punks EX, is composed of a series of short and punchy tracks, which is organized loosely around a series of concentric rings or dimensions, which looks at this experience leadership frame from an individual, a team, an organization, a customer, and then kind of beyond, to try and look at all of that. And when I was first thinking about it, first conceiving the idea, the thing that was in the back of my mind was, oh my God, second album syndrome. What if it's not as good as the first one? And I was like, oh no. And so I was like going, oh. And then I thought, I don't know if I have all the answers here. And I don't even know if I've got some of the answers. So I'm like going, oh, what if I make this kind of bigger and better, kind of in different ways? And so I borrowed an idea from R&B and hip hop albums, where they kind of introduce new artists. You have X track featuring Y artist. So we decided, I said, let's see if we can do that. We can assemble a whole bunch of collaborators, different voices from around the world that understand what we're trying to do and what we're trying to talk about and buy into it, but can add depth and perspective and flavor and ideas and creativity and knowledge and experience to that kind of like frame. So I've been able to assemble, and you can see it on the bottom, you can hear it, like there's all these kind of names. These are the collaborators kind of on the book. They look like this. Ta-da! This is the collaborator kind of like page for the book. And so we've got 12 different people that have contributed a number of different tracks. And they've ranged from San Francisco in the US, the west coast of the US, all the way through the East Coast to the UK, to Spain, to the Emirates, all the way out to Colombo in Sri Lanka. So I think we've covered quite a bit. We put our arms around. I don't think we've got our arms all the way around the world, but we've got quite a good reach. And the idea is that we wanted just to explore what this kind of means, but not necessarily to provide or to come up with any answers. But like Punks EX is almost to create an invite or a challenge or a poke to say, come on, people, you need to think about this differently, more holistically, more broad ranging, if you want to succeed. And because it's a collaborative effort, I'm sort of pleased to say that we decided that we're going to do the whole thing for charity as well. And we're going to do it for these folks. So Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders. And the reason why I decided that we should do it that way is because it's a collaborative nature, of the collaborative effort, but also in acknowledgement of all the stuff that we've gone through, that many people have gone through, people are still going through, and that many people will continue to go through in the coming months, if not years. So anything we can do to that, if we give the organization a bit of visibility, and if we can raise a little bit of money for them, then that's brilliant. I think they've been doing tremendous work for the last 50 years. And so I think that we explore all sorts of different things. We use stories, we use ideas, we sort of play around. I mean, this is not just a book about leadership from a human perspective. This book touches on everything from strategy to people to process to technology. I mean, an advanced technology and where technology is kind of going. It's all there because it's all an essential part of this. But ultimately, the book, in the words of Arlo Guthrie, its role is to disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. Because I think that's what we need. It's almost like the book is about disruption of mindset and approach. There are people that are going and leading kind of in this kind of way. And we need to surface those kind of people. But this book is there about saying, you're not alone, you're on the right track, keep going. But they're not in the majority. And we need to disrupt some of the people that are getting comfortable because everything feels like it's in place. And to say, no, you need to do better. The bar's just gone up and it will continue to go up. And if you haven't seen that it's gone up, and if you're not talking about things in this way and seeing that this is the way that things are going, then you're going to get left behind. So that's the role of the book. And I repeat, Arlo Guthrie's famous words is when he was talking about the role of protest in folk songs, the role of folk songs in protest. He says that their role is to disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. And that's the aspiration for this book, is to do exactly that but in this whole experience sort of space.
Thank you so much, Adrian. It's very insightful. Thank you. Picking up on this Arlo Guthrie quote, I'm a fan, actually. I play guitar and I still sing Riding on the City of New Orleans. Remember? Famous song. Good Morning, America. Give me an example of those who should be comforted, who deserve to be comforted.
So there's a. So I think I'll start with the one idea is, and there's a track in the book, and it's based on this idea called the Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. Now, Jekyll and Hyde is may be familiar with it from movies, but this kind of humble scientist drinks this potion, turns into this crazy man, and does kind of unspeakable, kind of evil kind of things. But I use that story as a way of helping people understand that we can sometimes view things or approach things can have like a split personalities, like not consistent, not congruent, as it were. Like, for example, we all wake up as human beings. We all wake up and we're simultaneously either working or, we're neighbors, we're friends, we're family members, we're husbands or daughters or kind of whatever it is. We're also consumers. We have these multiple personas. What I find fascinating is that you'll end up having many people that will go into, there'll be all these things, and they'll set high standards for what they expect out in the marketplace for when they're as a consumer, what they kind of buy, but then they will go to work or their place of work and they will cross the threshold, and then it's like, something happens. And they end up entering an organizational frame and end up doing things to customers or treating people in their organization in a way they would never find acceptable themselves. And so for me, there's a real Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. I'm asking people to look in the frame and go, am I being Mr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, or kind of like, or am I trying to dispel that? Am I going to be congruent across the piece? You know, people talk about, you know, I also get exploring the book about what does authentic really mean. People talking about authentic this and authentic that, and I'm like, you know, I challenge some of those things because what I want to do is, you know, as I say, asking the book, I say, look, so if I'm a jerk and I'm consistently a jerk, does that make me authentic? Question one. Question two, if I'm a jerk, but I try to be considerate, respectful, empathetic, generous, kind, does that make me inauthentic? Now, you might say that's mere wordplay, but I'm skeptical of many of these kind of like memes and kind of like bandwagons and trends and all that sort of stuff. And I want people to focus on not the labels, but the content and see things for what they are and understand what's important to you and not try and be like anybody else, but be yourself, but be the best version of yourself that you can be. And in the words of Maya Angelou, which I use a quote of hers right at the end of the book, and I'm just going to pull it up so I get it absolutely spot on. And this is the point, it's right at the back of the book, after everything. And she said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. So it's not asking people to be perfect, but it's asking people to open your eyes and see things for what they are, and see yourself for what you are, and see kind of how you need to improve things, whether it's a technological perspective, whether it's a people, a process, or systems, or brand, or orientation, kind of whatever it might be. Be honest about it, embrace it, step into it, because I think that's what it's going to require. This is not a magic thing. This is not overnight. This is hard work. It's always been hard work. There's no, you know, there's no overnight add water like a pot noodle sort of thing and like ta-da, you've got an instant kind of meal. This is not a pot noodle thing here, ladies and gentlemen. This is slow cooking.
I love what you're saying. And if we look back at, we've been doing SmartCom summits since the start of the pandemic. And every time we talk about technology with technologists and with leaders from technology, we end up talking about leadership and organizational models and people, right? Because that's the essence that we're doing at this platform, and that's also what you're talking about. As you look back at the pandemic years, we're also doing this interview online because it's convenient and you're in London and there's a virus out there and it's difficult. And we've had that conversation a couple of times in the shows that it's very efficient, right? For many people, working online is very efficient because you don't have to travel. You can just plug in at any time that works, and you can be very efficient for many roles. But we lack the creativity in many cases, the bonding. So people in creative roles or in business development or partnership, I mean, all this sort of stuff, it takes time, the slow cooking, right? Part of going to an event is listening to people talk, but the other part is hanging out and having a beer and bonding and connecting in different ways. So if you look at sort of transition that we've gone through, and modern work and hybrid work is here to stay, what sort of challenge is there then for the people that are creating this technology, right? They're working on turning the carriage into a modern car. What sort of advice would you give there, or how should we look at that technology, the big tech companies?
So I think, Rob, you're absolutely right, but that's such a huge topic. Like, how do we replace that sort of like in-person intangibility connection thingamabob that, you know, and it has dimensions across the piece, whether you're a customer, whether you're an employee, whether you're a leader, whether you're in innovation, creativity, whatever it might be, right? But let me give you a very specific example, which is very real for people, and it's very kind of close to my heart. It's in that core of customer service, right? Now, imagine you're working as in a service desk or a help desk or a contact center, right? And back in the day when everybody was in the office and say a call came in and it's a tough call, right? It could be a complaint or somebody's told you a really challenging story or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, right? What would normally happen, assuming that you're not in that sort of like kind of battery farm, kind of like digital, pod hutch things that you're chained to your chair. But what would happen is that you end up with your teammates around you would be able to recognize that you've just had a tough call based on what you've kind of saying, kind of your mood, all these different sort of things. And it'd be quite likely, if you have that sort of culture, that they would look out for you and go like, hey, Rob, I see that call was was really tough. Why don't you kind of take 5 minutes? I'll go get yourself a cup of tea. I'll cover for you. Right? And you can't account for some of that sort of stuff. Right? But when you're working in a hybrid kind of way, it's even harder to account for that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. We have the technological capability to start thinking about kind of like how that works, where you can do real-time call recording, transcription, analytics, and then try and bump up going, oh, that was a tough call, you might take a break thing, and then you can work that into workforce management, workforce engagement kind of platforms and all that sort of stuff. But that's so leading edge kind of right now. It's just not quite kind of there yet. But that's a technical, it's a technological kind of solution. But it doesn't also give the agent or the rep the opportunity to put their hand up and go, "Excuse me, can I take 5 minutes? Because oh my God, that was tough for me." And we have to understand that there's a relative part of all of this sort of stuff. But that's why I think some of this stuff is really, really interesting. And it's not about the technology. It's also about us as people and how we use and design the technology to help us produce those outcomes. Because there's challenges there for people as well, particularly leaders, because it requires a different type of leadership. It's no coincidence that you've got many of these kind of like leaders. I would suggest that most leaders that were like a couple of months ago advocating for everybody to get back to the office were the ones that enjoy and get their energy from interacting with lots of people and seeing lots of people about. Right? Because that's about them and the locus of their energy rather than about their employees. And so you end up kind of like, this is kind of where you when you start to unpeel all this stuff, it's really complicated, but like super interesting, but very hard.
In terms of time, Adrian, because we can easily talk about this for many more hours. And I'm really happy because you're going to be a regular on SmartCom, right? We talked about that before. I really look forward to additional follow-up sessions, panel sessions, and interviews with you and by you, because there's so much here to explore, right, and to discuss. And I like how we're bringing the tech companies and the non-tech thinkers together, right? Because together somehow we have to do it. A very practical final question for now. What can people do to start their slow cooking process? Everybody buy the book. Everybody buy the book. Get it on Amazon or wherever you can find it.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, around the world. So do it for me, a request. Do it for two reasons. One, because it'll help us raise some money for Doctors Without Borders, first and foremost. And two, maybe it's going to be a slow cooking recipe book. Right. And, you might not like slow cooking. It might frighten you. But hey, You never know until you kind of like if you take a spoon and have a taste. So that's the invite, as it were.
Right.
Get the book and have a taste. See what you think. And if you don't like the taste, at least you've raised some money for charity.
Yeah. Well, I remember
you can't lose.
With your previous book, I remember giving some copies away to certain people in my line of business. So that's always interesting. It makes for a great end of year gift, I would say. And I think, people can reach out to you, right, as well, if they want to dive in deeper, maybe talk about this, organize workshops and sessions, because that's what you do as well, besides writing and cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm a theoretical cook. I'm a cook of the mind. My culinary skills are.
Yeah, great. Well, I think it was great. I think Charles and I enjoyed this conversation a great deal, and I think we have food for thought, and we'll continue with that as soon as we can. Thank you so much, and take care over there. Good luck with the whole book.
Thank you, Adrian. I'll start reading the book today. Looking forward to it.
Welcome back for the final segment of this SmartCom Summit. Let's try to draw some conclusions. I four guests. Let me start with you, Sebastian Hooster, with Polly. We saw you in your little masterclass about your personas. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you very much. But looking back this whole afternoon, what's your takeaway?
I think the ongoing and increasing speed of change.
What does it mean?
In every segment. So whatever people see today and consider as the new normal won't be the new normal again tomorrow. A massive change, and it's very simple. You either embrace it or you'll be left behind. There's no choice. It's not like it's not going to happen if you put your head in the sand.
It's like Bill Gates said, right? I mean, innovation distinguishes the followers from the leaders.
I think so.
Okay. No? No? You're not going to quote Steve Jobs, probably, right?
No, definitely not. No, but today we're reinventing the future of work, and that future is hybrid. And the future is bright too, because it combines the best from the work we used to do at the office and work from remote. However, we're only scratching the surface. So hybrid work is not 2 days at the office and the rest from home. It's much more than that, and we've begun to scratch the surface. So there's so many more possibilities to increase our productivity and well-being at work with hybrid.
Yeah. Anna, your takeaway?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think we've heard a lot of challenges today, but we also heard a lot of potential that this COVID brings. And I think if we focus on this potential and are going to be innovative with it, we can create a much better world, I would say.
And our inspirational leader here, SmartCom leader.
I'm curious. I'm curious what do people, so the way I look at it is we have tech companies right here, agile, modern working, blah, 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 and breathing and living their own technology and their own platforms. We heard Stijn also, what is happening at their Reach and Microsoft, but now if you're not in this space, and you have a normal company and you're not sure what technology companies are doing, where do you start?
Could be scary for them, right?
It could be very scary. And what do people do when they're scared? They wait. Let's wait for, I don't know, the government to explain how it should be done.
Even worse, proactive resistance.
They hold off. They blame other people.
Yeah, resistance to change.
So where to start? And we heard Adrian say it's slow cooking, and it takes time. And I'm convinced that 10 years from now everything will be different. But I also think that, as you said, it's a change that's happening now. And companies that want to excel and thrive and do better, they can make decisions to do things different tomorrow, next week, January 1st. So where to start?
Because we heard Sebastian talk about the different personas, right, within a company, employees, and you guys, Microsoft has an extremely broad client base, right? I mean, it's everything all over the world. I can imagine you guys, also, diversify and say, what kind of clients do we have? What kind of customers do we have? And they have totally different and wide-ranging wishes and demands and expectations. Right?
That's definitely right, yeah. So what you see is that our products cater to both knowledge workers, the information workers, to the first line workers, but in a general sense. And I think the strength of what Microsoft does is that we design our products as a platform. Because when you sell a generic product to those two groups, the first line workers and the information workers, it can never cater to all needs.
Right.
So you can do that when you enable your product to be a platform and enable other companies to develop software to cater to the needs of specific verticals, for example.
Yeah. Well, and I think specific cultures also, right? Because we are pretending sometimes that all the world, everybody is the same. But if you look at, let's start with Europe. We have 27 countries, or 28 or 29. I don't know what the current count is. They're all different in their mindset, right? So we look at Western Europe and the Nordics and the UK. We're kind of advanced in cloud and everything. Other countries are different. So I think there's a big role for the local system integrators, resellers, telcos.
On the other hand, Rob, I wouldn't overcomplicate things either. I mean, the workshop I went through with Marcel this afternoon with the personas, I mean, we did research in worldwide companies of a certain size, and we came to the conclusion that in general, we can fit people in one of 6 personas. There's always exceptions, but a significant percentage of everybody who does work fits in those 6 personas. And I'm fine if you tweak them locally, but in the end, it's still their type of work. Whether you're in Asia Pacific, in the US, in Africa, in Europe, we can do that. So don't overcomplicate things. And the same goes, the most successful proof of concepts I've seen with platforms like Teams are small proof of concepts where you can quickly change and adapt things and just experience what works for my organization. And that is definitely, we have introduced new equipment to that end. It's no longer massively complicated stuff where you need an engineering degree to implement it. It's relatively simple, standardized, it will work and is authorized on certain platforms, go. And that's the most successful proof of concepts that we've seen. Nimble, smart, well measurable, go.
That would also be my advice to those companies who haven't started that on this journey. Start, because what we've learned from the pandemic is that it's different for every company. Every company has a different work style. Every individual has a different work style. The products are designed in such a way it meets the needs of those different work styles. So don't wait for a way that's right or proven. Just start and on the experiment and find out what works best for your company and the employees.
But Anna, do you still see entrepreneurs, corporations that are holding off, the smaller ones, maybe less advanced, maybe? I think it's also a money thing. I mean, you have to invest in the stuff you guys are selling, right? I can imagine entrepreneurs with all the uncertainty and in some sectors of the economy, huge problems, and let's not forget it. I mean, and holding off, not right now, maybe for example, in the hospitality business, right? I mean, worldwide, huge problems.
Yeah. I think as it scales up, they'll face other problems where this technology could help them. I think the other challenge that these smaller businesses have that software is eating the world, but they don't have the developers, so they have to lean on other partners to have it implement. And then on the one hand, you have standardization, just like you said. In this space, we've been standardizing, but then every small business has its own little variant, and I think that's been the challenge. How do you build something that is standardized? But at the same time, you can customize it without the cost of customization. And this is also
we tend to talk in meetings like this. We tend to talk about the winners, guys who are corporations, are successful, and part of the economy and part of your client base. For example, Microsoft again has such a broad client base. I can imagine it's not just winners, and you have to cater to those folks as well.
Yeah, but we and Microsoft cannot win without the partners. They not only deploy it with the customers, but also they had developed the software on top of our solutions and extend these solutions. And I wouldn't consider Microsoft a winner if you don't meet all customer needs. So I think the main takeaway here is that the tech giants like Microsoft have to collaborate with smaller ISVs that customize the software and extend the generic experience the tech giants offers.
Yeah, so it's about collaboration across the board. I think it's interesting to think about. Microsoft is a big leader in the space, right? Just like Zoom. I mean, there's a couple of these platforms that are really huge, and I think somebody mentioned recently that Microsoft has an $18.2 billion investment budget per year. And then the question was to some of the smaller players, how are you going to compete? And I guess the answer is you don't compete, you collaborate. And you augment, because there's so much to do. It's not a competition play right now. It's a, how do we get to the next phase all together, innovate, and then maybe 5 or 10 years down the road, we'll see the competition and sort out that stuff. But right now it's about taking advantage of the possibilities that are there and moving forward, because at the end of the day, it's about people, right? It's about people and jobs and wellness, and we touched on that also. It's about diversity. We don't have people, there are no people, and the people are getting sick and are falling out of the workplace. It's a serious issue for all of us. And that's, I think, for me, the main takeaway. It's not a competition thing, and that's why we never talk about this product is better than that product. It's about how do we get together, how do we as an industry also take that responsibility and that leadership to move forward and to embrace, let's say, the rest of the companies that need help. That's also why, I mean, with the summit, we started as a talk show a year and a half ago, right? Let's do a talk show because we're in lockdown. Now it's more a platform, and we've changed this winter summit into a series of 10 weeks with recurring. It's like cooking. Every week there's a little bit, and we'll continue to do that next year with a bunch of tracks on leadership and modern work and customer all these things that are important, and we'll come back. And I think that's the mission that we have as an industry to educate the world on what's possible.
And I'm curious to hear from you guys. I talked to Adrian and I made the comparison with the introduction of the car over 100 years ago, right? I mean, from a horse carriage to a carriage with an engine. And when that happened, people said, oh, that's a revolution. And it truly was a revolution. And if you look at the early pictures of cars, it looked like a horse carriage. Where are we now? Are we in the phase of a horse carriage with an engine? At the very beginning of a huge innovation track that's going to happen in the next, maybe not a couple of years, but in the next 10 or 15 years. Where are we? Because we have to realize, looking at history, innovation never stops. You tend to assume, I mean, today with the frightful five, well, Microsoft is one of them, but that's going to last forever? No, probably not. If you look at history, probably not. I don't know what's going to happen, but where are we in this? I mean, let me ask you, Microsoft guy, where are we?
I think, yeah, we've begun in a
glass bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a little crystal ball, but we're in the last 10 minutes of the show, so.
Yeah, I think we're, so what COVID has done is it has ensured we have a massive acceleration of adoption. So it's becoming even harder to look into that glass ball. We couldn't have imagined that 2 years ago we would have hybrid meetings at large scale with people joining from different places. Now there's the new technologies being experimented with, like augmented reality, mixed reality. We think it's far ahead, but maybe we'll use it sooner because we're used to faster rate of adoption. So who knows? Maybe we'll see that new technologies getting adopted faster. There's also a worry though, because as you said, acceleration is increasing. What happens nowadays is that people can't keep track of innovation. And technology and innovation is useless if people don't use it. Yep. So right now, trust it, exactly. Yeah. So right now in the software we have, there are literally hundreds of features to enable you to have a more productive workday or to work with a higher, to ensure more well-being in employees. But it's not being used. So, and that challenge will become bigger as the rate of innovation accelerates.
I think training and education of people, I mean, there's a lot of fear for technology as well. Will artificial intelligence become like this lord and master in our lives? I don't believe that, but if you apply it the wrong way, it definitely could. And there's a lot of things people don't understand about technology. I mean, features in Microsoft, people might not even be aware of it. So it's training and education on how to use stuff, what your smartphone is actually doing.
Because it changes every week,
yes,
right? It's very hard to keep track of
really
and to predict where it's going. And if you're, as long as you're in a mindset of I want to plan next year what's going to happen. So I think that's the starting point, right? Let it go in a way. It's trust your people to take steps, do the small proof of concepts, or work agile.
Because I mean, isn't one of the lessons of the whole COVID epidemic that it shows so clearly how easily people lose control and then lose trust in science, in governments, in doctors, in anything. And losing control, losing trust, and getting angry. And that will be, catastrophic for your business. I'm not saying that people don't trust you, but in general, you know what I'm saying?
No,
the whole process of losing control and then eventually turning it into some kind of anger and lack of trust.
Yeah, and the hard part, I think, for us in the industry, me coming from kind of a technical background, is that it's really hard to look at ourselves from the outside. So for me, it's all normal. I've been using the thing before Slack called FlowDoc, for years before Slack came out. So it was like when Slack came out or Teams, I'd already experienced it. I'm still waiting for the holodeck, by the way. So for me, it's still early days, I would say.
Take notes.
But I agree. There is a risk that we're losing people, and I think we have to step back sometimes and make our technology a lot more. Take out a lot of features and make it a lot simpler and focus on those features. And I think within Enreach, that's been my challenge as well, with a lot of smaller companies using our products. How do we take these pretty advanced, like conversational AI? Can I sell that to a small company? No, you can't. You have to start looking at their pain and where you could help them, and not talk about those technology things.
Because you see, in technology, innovation never stops, but it also always goes through phases of distrust. Look at the train, look at the car, look at computers, look at the television. That's
change. And change.
Well, you have to take it into account, being in this market.
No, I fully agree. And I think every change, although people think they are, they are well adopted to do change, it's not in your nature. You don't want to change. So change management and making people actually follow your lead and follow your ideas, well, that requires knowledge on how to communicate it and how to get these people to come with you, to come along, and that goes for the train, and that goes for the planes, and that goes for cars, and that also goes for the
television. Was the end of the world, sir.
Was the end of the world. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
So, what's the lesson of history, Rob?
Well, I'm thinking back. Sorry, Remco, about to Steve Jobs when he came out with the iPhone, and there was a certain gentleman from Microsoft. Let's say the old Microsoft, in a way.
Steve Ballmer.
Who said it's impossible, blah, blah, blah. And Nokia everybody thought it was impossible, and 2 or 3 years later, it was the new normal, right? And people loved that change, by the way. I think people don't mind change, they don't want to be changed, right? They want to be in some sort of role themselves. And the thing with the iPhone was, of course, it was simple. It was the most simple. That's why nobody believed it would work. It was so simple. Didn't even have a keyboard and didn't even.
It was a combination of existing technology.
And it didn't have a battery, and nobody thought it would work. And now here we are. And I think that's the next step for the technology, because also the iPhone with the App Store, it allowed people, the users, it gave them control. They can put on that device whatever they wanted to do. So I think if we're going to that phase now, and I agree with you about the car, I think it's a horseless carriage right now. Where to start, which is great, because there's so many opportunities and so many possibilities, and we hear what's happening inside Microsoft, because you shared some of the internal developments, right, that you're testing. It's really cool. All that stuff is coming. It's going to help us do our work.
But the lesson also is here, looking back, it's very much about entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
The right mindset, the right climate, the right atmosphere in a company. And you guys, he mentioned that fact way back, and Microsoft came back I mean, in a great way. So that's also about creativity and entrepreneurship, I think. Don't you think, Anna?
I agree. Yeah, and I think hyperscalers have really helped those small companies. We used to be a small company, build things and scale in a way that even big companies can't. And I think that's been a real, interesting move that I've seen in our industry. As a small company, you can be so. You can build things so quickly and scale to a level where you could only dream of.
10 years ago.
And actually, you have an advantage over the bigger companies where they are still like focused on their own things, and hyperscalers are a threat. And so, I think entrepreneurs have the ability now to compete with the big players. I would say.
We're almost out of time. Finally, and I'm starting with you, Remco. Looking forward, what's the biggest challenge, the biggest opportunity going forward with a company like Microsoft? Or for you personally, I mean, what do you see looking at all this stuff we've been discussing here?
I think that realizing the workplace is different for every company and every individual, and having a solution that enables them to work in the way they want to. Mm-hmm. So here you see the platform strategy again. Doesn't matter which application you're used to, can compete with Microsoft, doesn't matter, please install it on Teams. Yep. Works the same with the iPhone. Why did the iPhone really take off? Yep. It was because of their platform strategy. Same with Microsoft Teams. And I think that's really one of our main focus, enable people to work in the way they want to work.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the platform thought. I think the other challenge is scaling it. So even though we have all these companies and the ISVs that are building solutions on top of it, maybe that's not enough. And this is where we've been trying to experiment with taking it a level higher with kind of a scripting language that could also be done by non-developers to bring in this community of non-developers, because we actually have too little developers, I think.
Yeah. So it's a whole
in this world.
No-code.
Exactly. I think there's a whole space there in the low-code, no-code area. Yep. And it should not be, because you see the no-code part, I think sometimes is too trivial. It's easy, but you can only do trivial stuff. And we're finding a balance there where maybe the programming is a bit too hard. We're trying to navigate this in between, where it should be easy but not trivial. Yep.
Yeah, I think apart from everything that's already said, experience equality. No matter where you are situated at the moment, the way you collaborate with your colleagues, your peers, your stakeholders, it's the same experience wherever you are. And that technology is already there for largely, but it's still being improved, and we can make the communication as natural as possible, and it regardless of time and place.
Yeah. And Rob, and before I give you the floor, thank you for putting this program together. I think you did, again, a tremendous job.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that we're bringing these people together and that we're continuing it on a more regular basis in smaller bits and pieces. Because I think it's important that we have discussion, and I'm looking forward to all the great things that people are building or making or changing, because that's the way we're rebuilding, we ourselves as a society, we're rebuilding our office of the future, our companies of the future. And I think the next couple of years are going to be very interesting to see what comes out as the winner. And there's no crystal ball. There is no crystal ball. That's my conclusion from today.
Crystal ball is very low tech, you know it, right?
I know.
Very low tech.
Very low tech.
Okay. Thank you so much, all four of you, for joining us and the other speakers this afternoon. That concludes this summit, ladies and gentlemen. I saw an interesting quote somebody said about creativity and innovation, who said creativity is thinking up new things, innovation is doing new things. And I would add, leadership is not only being creative, being innovative, but building trust among your employees, your stakeholders, and people around you. Thank you very much. I hope you can help in building that trust. Thank you very much.